Hey, how's it going, everyone? Long time no see. So sorry I've been a little busy here with my job. Trust me, my schedule will get better as promised, and I'll be able to have more time to do videos. But these first couple weeks with the new job, I'm really trying to understand everything. For those of you who don't know, I transitioned. I'm now selling life insurance. So I've been doing a lot of work with some great people that are training me and also some work on my own. So I do apologize that I haven't been putting out as many videos, but that should be changing soon. I just wanted to let everyone know that our Pennsylvania Patriot Radio, that's normally at 11 a.m. on Saturdays, it actually had to get postponed due to a conflict of interest. And it's going to be at noon today, so that'll be in 25 minutes. This is Eastern time. So I just wanted to do a little pre-video letting everyone know this will be coming up at noon. Carlos put together the show. So a lot of times what we do is we have a pre-call. I've been falling asleep early, so I haven't had a chance to talk to Carlos. So the show will be a surprise. You'll get to hear my thoughts. I assume we'll be talking about, the president and the first lady and all the other people that have gotten COVID and kind of the fallout around that. So what's up, Pasty? So yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know, whatever channel you're watching on right now, whether it be my Twitch, D Live, YouTube, here at noon will be the actual radio show. For those of you that are new, if you're just checking this out and you're new to the show, I do apologize. There's not a lot of audience interaction on the radio show, but you have to understand why. It actually is a radio show. So like most shows on the radio, it's hard, just because we're also broadcasting online, it's hard with that format to then have an interaction with a lot of the people through the chat. So I do apologize for that. However, on my normal shows that are just online, I am trying to do a better job of interacting with chats and things like that. So, oh, great. Pasty's filling out your mail-in ballot. Okay, awesome. So, yeah. So, if you check it, thank you, Patriot Jumper. Thanks for being here. Good morning to you. So yeah, I was just letting everyone know the radio show is going to be here in 25 minutes right on this channel that you're watching. So it should be a good show. Me, my friends Carlos Saldivia and Todd Bartlett. So it'll be a good show. I'll be leaving here in a couple minutes to do a mic check with them. Make sure that we got everything in order. As far as my schedule this week goes, I believe on Tuesday night, me and my friend Drone Tech are debating, I don't know who, on whether or not, I don't know exactly what the question of the debate's going to be, but it basically has to do with whether or not the Russia investigation was legitimate into Trump and his team, which of course I'll be arguing it wasn't because it was a coup. So that should be a good debate. Will we get an update on the baseball story? Yeah, I would assume I'll make sure to ask Todd what the current relevance is on that. I will say that there is at least one update that I'm aware of, and I'm sure Todd will be able to tell us more. But I guess a spoiler for the show, there were actually search warrants that were issued now for a lot of the players involved, and this came from the Attorney General of Pennsylvania. So for those of you that don't know that story that may be listening, Todd, one of the best journalists in the country as far as I'm concerned, he found out this story. The Myrtle Beach, or women's sports high school baseball team a couple years ago went to Myrtle Beach for a baseball tournament, as they do almost every year. While there, the players sexually assaulted one or two players and videotaped it, then released that video on social media so that the school could mock those people. And this, from my understanding, this wasn't something that you would be able to brush off as, oh, it was just a little hazing. This was disgusting sexual acts that were forced upon at least two people. I believe two. I've never seen the video, so I'm just going through the reporting. And then the local officials, be it the baseball coach, the principals of the school board members, the local police, all of them sought to bury this story. Todd's been pushing forward on it for 2 years. It's now gotten all the way to the actual state level, the Attorney General of the state who's now investigating this. And as developments came out that the state Attorney General was investigating this about a month ago, Todd, who is the journalist who has pushed this story for 2 years, has been harassed in town, had threats levied at him, all sorts of things. He actually had his car firebombed. I'm not making this up. This is literal. Literally, his car was firebombed in his driveway. Predominantly, I would guess, for reporting on this story. So he receives many threats, and this is small-town Williamsport. So for us in the greater area of the world, it might seem like, oh, it's just weird local politics, but it has national implications because the people that were tasked with protecting the children in Williamsport, instead they started to chant things like Black Lives Matter And this area is systemically racist to deflect from the fact that they shirked their responsibility and actually allowed these kids to be sexually assaulted and covered up for it. So it's really a microcosm of what we see occurring in the nation. And just to live in a day and an age where you see one journalist that actually is trying to do the right thing and get justice for victims, particularly child victims, which what more noble cause is there? To see him be personally attacked for that's really astounding. So, yeah, hopefully... oh, that's fine, Bayonet. I don't mind. Hopefully, that story works out well and those kids receive justice, but I'm sure Todd will have an update on that story. Other stories, like I said, we'll be talking about the President, First Lady, and other people around them getting COVID, kind of the reaction that we've seen from many of the people on the left, and maybe some debate reaction. Oh, no problem, Bayonet. Robert the Genius. Say potate. Okay. I would have to be a very convincing bot. By the way, I get that sometimes. People are like, on Twitter, people will be like, you're a bot. I'm like, there's literally thousands of hours of me responding to people in chat online. So I don't know how it could be mistaken that I'm some kind of bot. But potato. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So, all right, I do have to be going to make sure I get this audio check done. But again, just wanted to let everyone know, in 20 minutes, come back right here. We'll be doing the radio show. Unfortunately, because it's a radio show, I won't be able to respond to much of the chat. But it should be a good show this week. I do apologize that it wasn't at the regularly scheduled time. But, yeah, this was something that was a conflict of interest, or conflict of schedule. So, all right, we'll see you all in 20 minutes. As always, have a good one. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
most enthusiast people who love hockey fights. And I think there's like a website called hockeyfights.com. And, you know, you can go and get your fill of hockey fights. But the very best fights are the ones that are where people are standing there toe to toe and they're going at each other. Do you know why? Because they want to fight. They want to fight. Let them fight. Don't get in the way. Don't officiate. Don't grab one guy's jersey as the ref. One guy's jersey and pull his jersey back so he can't defend himself or he can't throw punches. Let them fight. Chris Wallace didn't do that. Chris Wallace, ostensibly, for all those people that are in sports and that are following us, Chris Wallace was the third man in. And the president won anyway. So I wasn't surprised. I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't deluded. The president won the debate. But if you really wanted to see a debate, two major things. Chris Wallace should have been completely and utterly fair and tough on both candidates. And two, when they started yelling at each other, he should have let them fight, regardless of what Donald Trump was doing, whether he was right or wrong, whether he was interrupting or he wasn't interrupting. It's Canadian, it's hockey, but it's real life, right? It's real life. They both wanted to fight. I used to be a store detective in New Jersey. I used to go to court all the time. And one of the greatest things I heard in court, it was an assault case. And the guy that was the defendant said, you know, Your Honor, I understand why I'm here. I understand he doesn't look too good. But what I want to make sure that you understand is that we both wanted to fight. So we did. We're going to go into a deep dive today about the debate. But I want to close my open with the following. The number of kitchen table issues in this country among the middle and working class is the economy. Number one, unquestionably. It's indisputable that the Democrats collapsed it on purpose. The second is law and order. Would you like to take a guess as to where the Democrats fall on what Black Lives Matter and Antifa are doing to this country? You know where they fall? We don't know because they're silent. The third is education, run by Democrats. And that's indisputable that Johnny can't read because of the system and the strategies set by activists and political Democrat educators. Think about that. Because this election is going to be a referendum as to where we want to go in our country in the future. Do we want to go the route of capitalism and a republic, constitutional republic, or do we want to go the route of a Marxist totalitarianism form of government going forward? Because to get back to where we are today, the models are out there, starting with my home country, or I should say birth country of Venezuela. That being said, Rob, good morning. Please tell Chris Wallace, who is the mob?
It's a great point. The mob is the violence that we've seen, even with the studies that the left tries to use, such as the Princeton study that said only 7% of Black Lives Matter rallies have resulted in violence, shows over 220 locations that have resulted in violence since George Floyd's death, of mob violence. The mob is the left. The mob is Black Lives Matter. The mob is Antifa. That's who the mob is. We know this. This isn't this isn't something that should come as a shock to people. It is the left that this violence is coming from. The question that Chris Wallace asked Trump that has been the result that's resulted in all the attacks from the left. We should really focus in on what exactly this question was. But what Chris Wallace was doing was, he wasn't a moderator. He was a propagandist, much like the majority of the mainstream media, for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. And so what does the Democratic Party do? Their number one specialty, the thing that they continue to go back to the well to over and over and over again, is accuse you of what they really do. And so, for months, we saw the Democratic Party and people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Chris Wallace and people in the media refuse to comment on the riots that we saw across the country. Instead, they said, oh, it's right-wing agitators, or oh, it's not really happening. And then once their polling numbers showed the American people were sick and tired of it, they switched and they said, of course, but the riots are Trump's fault. And so Wallace, in the first debate, one of the soundest and most true attacks on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is, not only did they refuse to condemn these riots, except once or twice very small, but they actually said, Kamala Harris famously said, that the unrest should continue and will continue, and Joe Biden staffers and Kamala Harris herself pushed a bail fund to get these violent rioters and people like accused rapists, accused people that shot at cops, accused arsonists, that got all of them out of jail. Chris Wallace knew that this would be a big attack that Trump would have on Biden, and so Chris Wallace formulated a question to do the bidding of Joe Biden. That question wasn't, do you condemn white supremacy? For all those that are beating their chest that Trump refused to condemn white supremacy. He didn't. He said 3 times, sure, I condemn them. But even aside from that, notice how Wallace phrased the question. He said, do you condemn white supremacy and militias with violence that we've seen in places like Wisconsin? Well, what did we see in Wisconsin? What did we see in Kenosha? We saw the police ordered to stand down while violent Black Lives Matter protesters burned the city down night after night. Then we saw citizens come together because they were fed up with it and defend their property. But Chris Wallace likens them to white supremacists. To them, they're one and the same. Joe Biden then takes it a step forward and says, oh, and the Proud Boys. And so they're not asking Trump a question, they're making an argument. By the way, this is something that any good debater should do. When you're asking a question, you're doing so in the form of making your point. Chris Wallace wasn't the debater. Chris Wallace was the moderator. But what he was doing was operating on the side of Joe Biden. And so to answer your question, the mob is the left. Overwhelmingly, it's the left. We can see it. They're engaged in cancel culture. They're engaged in political terrorism of using violence or intimidation to achieve political points that's directed primarily at civilians. And yet, Chris Wallace tries to deflect and say, oh, no, it's the right-wingers. Just like Chris Wray tried to do for the FBI. Just like the majority of the mainstream media is doing.
It's laughable.
They're telling you, don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe your lying eyes. What you just saw for 4 months of our country burning, they're trying to act... It's an illusion. Right, it's an illusion. It wasn't the left, it was the right. That's what they'll have you believe. And so, we could get into discussions later of exactly who the Proud Boys are. But basically, the argument is this. You, as we've been saying on this show, and I've been saying on my show for months, the left thinks you don't have the right to defend yourself. You don't have the right to have the police defend you. Your rights are to allow and beg and plead on your hands and knees, praying, not to your God. They don't like God either. You can pray to them and their leftist mob that they please spare you and your family. That's your only right. And if you fight back, you're a white supremacist. That's what they're saying. That's what that question was. And that's why, although I think Trump could have been more articulate, that's why I don't think his answer was that bad. Now, there were other things that I think Trump left on the table in this debate, but that was a horrible, horrible example of just how bad the Democrats and their media allies are in pushing a false narrative and accusing you of exactly what they are.
So, Rob, it's Democrats doing Democrat things. Correct, Todd? Like, for example, Wendy Ullman and her political theater statement this week, which was just delicious. You're looking very comfortable today, Todd.
I'm masking my feelings, gentlemen. I'm now masking my feelings for political theater.
So tell us exactly what that meant. Now tell us the story about what happened there.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you want the reason they went to Philadelphia suburbs to try to regain the narrative, or do you just want the political theater idea?
We want both. We want both.
So I believe it was last Monday that there was a press conference called, and I attended, and it was with the governor. And I asked the governor, first question, it was off topic from what was going on with the stigma with the opioid crisis, which is what they were rolling out, was a program to study that, which that's great. I'm glad that they're doing that.
For people listening, that was the object of the press conference, correct?
Yes. They had the secretary, I believe it's DDAR, is the secretary of the department she runs. And then they had two of the folks in person that were helping with this program. And then they had another person with a recorded statement. So they asked they wanted an on-topic question, which they got from another journalist. And then I had already stated that I would like to ask the governor a question. Mm-hmm. So then the governor acknowledged me from his front row seat. And then when he got back to the podium, he said, yes, what's your question? And my question was, you're very outspoken about 200,000 dead nationally and over 8,000 dead in Pennsylvania, and you're kind of laying that at the feet of the president. Well, how can you lay those deaths at his feet when in Pennsylvania, all the seniors that you all sent back into nursing homes, a great majority of them unfortunately passed away? What's your reaction to that, and how can you explain, that situation? And he goes, you mean when people got to visit their loved ones in the nursing homes? I said, no, Governor, it's the folks that had COVID that went back into the nursing homes and unfortunately passed away. Well, I don't understand how you're conflating the two, was his reaction. And he just kind of took it from there and didn't really have an answer. So then I followed it up with, well, you've sent the Trump campaign any number of letters about large gatherings and it's against your guidance. It's not a good idea. Did you send the same letter to the Biden campaign? And Governor Wolf's response was, well, it didn't get me anywhere sending it to Trump. And oh, by the way, I think Biden's being responsible and doing it the right way. And he doesn't have large crowds, which I just thought was one of the seminal moments of this election cycle for a sitting governor to say that about any candidate, regardless. And now we know that the president, the first lady have tested positive. Many other folks have tested positive as well for COVID-19. We'll get into that as the show progresses. Well, then the last question that I was able to get in that press conference was, Governor, have you decided on the indoor limit of 25 for Election Day? And will you be lifting that limit or changing the guidance on that, extending the hours for polling for Election Day? He looked off camera, came back to me. Great question. Haven't really thought about it. Haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. And thanks for coming. And then left. So there was a 24, 36-hour news cycle that really was being fed by those three questions and answers by any number of folks. There was a Capitol Steps event on Tuesday where some of the elected leaders in the House and State Senate used those types of questions and answers for policy positions that they're either undertaking or going to have in the near future. And then they went to a Philadelphia suburb and started outlining a lot of things that are going on with the Affordable Care Act. And that gets you to the point of Ullman and the governor, and Ullman on a hot mic talked about, and with the governor, that they weren't going to wear masks at the podium. And then somebody let it slip that, well, it's for political theater, that the masks are for political theater.
Right. So they're mocking us.
That's not a life of its own.
Right. They're mocking us.
Yeah,
correct?
They are. They are.
So you picked up the story. You talked about it. Politics PA talked about it. and that was it. It died because it's not a narrative that the media will forward because it's Democrats doing Democrat things.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I want to be clear. I mean, Carlos, you know this. I was one of the first people in the country when the CDC told us not to wear masks. You remember what I said? I said, this is something so stupid only an expert would say. How could they, this disease that they knew next to nothing about? They weren't saying, we're not sure if masks will work. They were saying, don't wear a mask. And I said, wait a minute, something's fishy here. That just sounds weird. I'm not here to give you any medical advice. I don't think you, Carlos, or Todd are. That's not what we're here to do. But one of the things that I think we can all agree on, and that we've all been saying is, whatever the experts are saying, and whatever our leaders are telling us is good for us, it is incumbent that they themselves behold themselves to the same suggestions and regulations that they're putting forth for the common people. So when we see over and over the people in leadership roles, whether it be Nancy Pelosi or Lori Lightfoot or Whitmer or Tom Wolf, breaking the orders that they enforce upon us, that means that the average person looks at that and goes, I don't believe any of this crap. And I don't blame the average person for thinking that. So when we can see on a hot mic that the governor and what's Ullman's position? The woman that said that it was for political theater. What's her position?
I believe that she is just a Bucks County, possibly commissioner.
Well, when
it
you
was in Bucks County,
right?
It was in Bucks County. So because it was, he's going to all these counties that and having press conferences in these counties that that are counties that they want to win, that
right?
They need to have
But when you
the
see
collar counties around Philadelphia,
right? So when you see those people in positions of leadership admit, oh, we don't believe in these masks. To us, it's just political theater. And then when they're on camera, they're telling you, masks are the most important thing in the world. My goodness, the director of the CDC says a mask could be more important than a vaccine. But then when the cameras are off and you get a little glimpse of that, every single time they're taking the mask off going, these are garbage. We don't care about these. Right. It's just, and now we have an admission, it's just political. Right.
Punctuated by how Dr. Fauci behaved at the opener of the Nationals opening game, where he threw out the first pitch and then went in the stands and sat without a mask.
Yep.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts, Todd, on what happened this week with the Comey investigation. Oh, before you do that, were there any other comments that you wanted to make about the governor?
Well, I did want to, we'll get to the governor here as the show progresses, but I want to give everybody an update on the president's health, because his physician just came out within the last half hour with an update. And if I can clarify for my media friends who apparently left their brains at home, and when the good Lord was handing them out, many of my journalist friends thought he said trains and they were the ones that whistled. Mm-hmm. If you hear that a patient who has been diagnosed with COVID-19 takes supplemental oxygen, if it's news to you since March, COVID-19 is a respiratory issue. If you're just now getting to the party, when somebody gets supplemental oxygen, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're in respiratory distress. So, of course, yesterday, all of the media people that are at the press conference with the president's doctor are saying, well, was he given oxygen? Was he given oxygen? You're giving us misinformation. Well, first of all, let me address
what's
something.
up, Mary?
Because certain local school districts are great about hiding behind FERPA, HIPAA, and any other abbreviation they can come up with when it comes to rights.
I'm doing my radio show right now, but real quick, what's
Everybody
up?
has HIPAA rights for their health and their medical records, apparently, except the President of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no problem.
Supplemental oxygen. Are you ready for this?
I'll be out there later to finish, but I gotta go. I'm in the middle of my radio show. Okay.
Level dropped to 94%.
Oh, no problem. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Not 80s, not 50s, not 30s, not 20s. 94%. And the doctor just said he was on it for an hour or less.
Mm-hmm.
He was on it again over the last 24 hours as a supplement because it dropped again to 94%.
And
never below 90.
Right, and he is the president of the United States, So more precaution, not less.
Right. So for all my media friends, it's normal
Right.
that he gets supplemental oxygen. Normal.
But we
It's
will
not a news
note.
story.
We will note that you're cheering for him to do badly or die. We will note
Long
that.
story short, his doctor just said they're looking at discharging him as early as tomorrow. So
Yeah.
can I just frame this for a moment? The President of the United States went to Walter Reed for a working weekend out of an abundance of caution, and looks like he's never left the job, and he's going to be back on the job, looks like Monday morning. But if you were to listen to the world media, and instead of watching domestic media, I've been checking out some of the international media. It is an abomination the way they're treating the president.
Oh yeah, no. Reuters is leading the pack. So
it's an abomination.
Who comes out with the story that he went back to the White House and he put the whole entire world in danger first? The Times, the Post, Reuters, Newsweek. Who comes out with that story first? If he goes back, like say tomorrow or tonight,
They'll hold it.
right?
They'll hold that story.
They'll come out and say that he's going to infect the world. It's so
the
irresponsible.
biggest story was they wanted to transition of power because he was on supplemental oxygen in the White House. They wanted the 25th Amendment invoked.
Right, invoked the 25th. Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
So,
by the way, is a history buff the two of you are? When Ronald Reagan was shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the 25th invoked as a matter of history?
No.
Shot in surgery, under anesthesia, in surgery, 25th. Invoked? Yes, no? No is the answer.
And just real quick to use that, because it's a great example. I was born in 1984, but I don't recall in my looking back of that a giddiness from the majority of the mainstream media that, hopefully Reagan doesn't make it. That's what I'm seeing now.
Right.
And I want to be clear on something. I'm not going to claim that there aren't people on the other side that defend Trump or the Republicans that don't act repugnant when someone on the left gets ill or dies. However, I think there's a difference. Every side, I don't begrudge that every side will have people that are bad actors on them. I get that. What we're talking about here, though, are people...
60%.
Well, and it's people with positions of influence as well, right? It's not just regular streamer online or your neighbor, that doesn't really have a voice that's going to reach people. We're talking about mainstream media people. We're talking about, for example, what was it? The former, someone who worked in Obama's campaign, one of his staffers, saying that he or she hoped that...
Spokesperson for Obama and for Biden, actually.
Right. The Washington Post tweeted, "What's it going to be like to no longer think about Trump?"
Right.
Then they had to delete it. It's the Washington Post.
Right. Now listen, I have, for example, I had no love for the positions that Ruth Bader Ginsburg took. But with all sincerity, I feel terrible that she died. My heart goes out to her family. I hope that she got to spend time with her family at the end of her life and that she achieved what she wanted in her life. I truly mean that. I mean that when Joe Biden's feeling ill, or if Joe Biden, with kind of his, competency issues failing, I feel bad for him. So if you're out there and you see so many people on the side, and here's the irony. The left, the Democrats, are the party that tells us, we're your moral superiors. We're the party of compassion. We care. We're good people. We're not like those heartless Republicans. Don't judge them by their words. Judge them by their actions. How are they acting now that they think that the president's suffering some life-threatening illness? As Todd's reporting, it seems as if possibly the president, according to his doctor's report today, is possibly returning home as soon as tomorrow. So hopefully it's not as serious as those on the left would like. But it's terrible.
Did either of you notice if anybody other than Joe Biden and Tulsi Gabbard sent condolences to the president, specifically Schumer or Pelosi?
I didn't see it, but that's not to say that they didn't in some form. I didn't see it. I'll tell you what I didn't
see it.
Thanks to you, Carlos, what I did see was Andrew Yang's response. right? Andrew Yang's one of those guys. He's trying to bridge the gap between left and right? He's a different type of politician. He's someone for the people. He's not getting involved in the toxicity that is politics. What did Andrew Yang say? Did he say, oh, my condolences to Trump and his wife? He said, nope. I hope Biden doesn't get it. Good job, Andrew Yang, you scumbag.
That's exactly what the reaction was when they heard that the president got sick or contracted or tested positive. The entire left screamed and said that they hoped that Joe wouldn't get sick. My thoughts exactly. First thing I thought of, these are the comments that you were hearing from the left. Democrats doing Democrat things.
Let me tell you, real quick, I want to tell you you know who Norm Macdonald is? He's a comedian.
Oh, yeah, the comedian.
One of my favorites. He has this woman on his podcast one time, and she's just super left woke, yelling about Trump, trying to ban Muslims, etc., etc. And Norm's joking with her, but she doesn't get it. And Norm says to her, one of my biggest fears is that Islamic terrorists will get their hands on a dirty bomb, detonate them over New York City, killing hundreds of thousands of people. And then what would the reaction be against Muslims? And she's like, I know. Do you get what he did there? He's pointing out she doesn't care about the hundreds of thousands of dead Americans. She's concerned that it might make Muslims look bad. This is the same thing we see here. My concern is that Donald Trump would get sick and die from COVID, and it could spread to Biden. That's the left's concern. The left's concern wasn't, my God, the president and the first lady got sick with an illness that could be serious. Their concern was, oh, I hope he doesn't spread it to Biden. And that lets you know everything about them. Had Biden come down with COVID, I guarantee that my reaction would have been, oh my God, I hope he didn't give it to Donald Trump. My reaction would be, I hope that he's safe. I hope that he makes it through it. I don't want to see anyone die in politics or in general. So it just takes a special kind of hatred that you're trying to mask for your first thought to be, oh, I don't care at all that our president has an illness. I just hope he doesn't spread it to the other guy.
Right. And the core ideology behind that thought is the fact that, he got COVID. He deserves it.
Does the first lady deserve to get it too?
Oh, absolutely. She's a Republican.
By the way, his comment yesterday, the president's comment yesterday, if you haven't noticed, he goes, if you haven't noticed, and the first lady, Melania, beautiful Melania, has the plague, and if you haven't noticed, she's much younger than me.
Yeah.
I just thought it was one of the greatest lines he's ever said, ever.
So
have you noticed she's much younger than me?
Yeah.
Up her recovery process.
We have said from the very beginning, and one of the reasons specifically this is targeted at the governor of Pennsylvania, we have said from the very beginning, Democrat leaders, let me be more specific, treat us like we are diseased cattle. That's the problem that we have with the shutdowns and with the way that they're dealing with the COVID, is that we're being treated as if we are diseased cattle, and we're not even sick yet.
But Carlos,
we haven't even tested positive yet. So if you do get it, Rob, you deserve it. Oh, you lost your business and you lost your life savings because we collapsed the economy? Well, you deserve that too, because you're ignorant and you don't have a college education. You're not us.
So let me just give you two quick thoughts that I have on this. The first is, if it's done, notice they didn't have anything to say about Black Lives Matter. So, for example, we know in our state that Governor Wolf admittedly violated his own order to go march with Black Lives Matter, correct? Let's say that Governor Wolf came down with COVID as a result of that march. Do we think that the left would be saying, well, hey, he violated his own orders, he had it coming? Or an even better example, you remember when everyone violated the orders in Washington, D.C., and hundreds of politicians, primarily those of positions of prominence in the Democratic Party, went to the funeral of John Lewis, where they stood shoulder to shoulder singing hymns? You remember that? Now, if they would have all got COVID, do you think that the Democrats would be saying, well, hey, they violated those orders. That's what they get for attending a service? Of course they wouldn't have said that. right? And that's the despicableness. They did this with Herman Cain before. We talked about this then.
Right.
They acted like, oh, Herman Cain died.
He deserved to die.
Right.
He deserved to die because he went to Tulsa. And this is everybody. Even the in Lycoming County, my friend Rick Marabito said, and I quote, "It was the governor of Pennsylvania that kept us and Pennsylvania off the top 10 most deaths in the country."
Well,
it was the governor that did it. If it's good, it's the Democrats doing it. If it's bad and it's death, it's the Republicans doing it. And they don't hear themselves. They don't hear themselves.
Say that again.
They don't have any equanimity.
Carlos, say that again about the top 10. I want that to sink in because I'm going to rebut it. But just go ahead and say it again.
In one of the, you know how you have commissioners have a comment after the meetings? I guess maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. Might have been 2. Rick Marabito said, and I quote, "It was the governor of Pennsylvania who did the hard work of keeping Pennsylvania from the top 10 most deaths in the country from COVID."
Respectfully,
it was our governor.
Respectfully, that's
inaccurate. And then he read all the states. We were like 11.
Respectfully, at a time during this pandemic, that's factually inaccurate.
But forget about the inaccuracy. I hear what you're saying. My point is that they will there is no equanimity. And if there is no equanimity, how can you expect us to trust you if you can't call balls and strikes honestly?
Look, an even better example is the premier person that we're told by the left and the right that we need to listen to about this virus is Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci goes on national TV, and he's going to tell us what state handled the virus best and what governor handled it best. Who did he cite?
New York!
New York!
The one that has the most deaths.
That's who he cited.
New York is what my wife calls all these nursing homes death palaces.
Right.
The state of New York is the Wizard of Oz death palace.
And when you look,
the premier death palace is New York. But the governor can sleep well at night, he says.
Can I go back to your point on Commissioner Marabito again, respectfully?
No, he's my friend. I love him like a brother. We were Jesus Christ.
We were in the room.
Are you serious?
We were in the room with the commissioners on the phone call with the Department of Health. Was it the Thursday, the day before, wasn't it? The Thursday? Yeah. Wednesday or Thursday?
Right, before we went.
When Lycoming County was one of the last holdouts in the yellow phase.
Right.
And when it was announced who was in the room on the call with the Department of Health, okay, there was a from the Department of Health.
Mm-hmm.
The very next day, Lycoming County was put into the green.
And for people who don't understand the context, it was announced that you were in the room, that you were a journalist in the room with the commissioners, right? And they said, which is a signal for the people who are listening, okay? It's a signal for the state not to lie because they know Todd knows the truth and knows the numbers. And they can't afford for this to blow up in their face with a lie like the Lycoming County coroner exposed in the video that we did, where they had to go back and recalibrate the numbers the very next day by over 11%. Total 11%.
So as we sit in the first weekend in October, my statement after the call ended, and the premise was the county wanted the numbers and the thresholds that they were being held in yellow and not going into green, okay, from the Department of Health. So Commissioner Marabito, to his credit, said we'd like to see those numbers.
Yeah.
And the Department of Health, gave him the nod. Okay.
Right. That's when he's at his best.
Right.
I want the information.
I want the information.
I want to know how you get it.
Deserve that. Right. Provide.
Exactly.
Call concludes, and I looked at all the people in the room and I said, listen to what I'm going to tell you right now. They would rather you go green than give you those numbers.
Yep.
We sit here the first weekend in October. They've never seen the numbers.
That's a direct quote, and I know because I was in the room too.
Yep.
And that is a direct quote that you said. They will rather have you go green than give you the numbers. And it's something that Rob rattled the saber on for months.
Yep.
For not months, but for weeks before that happened. They would rather die themselves of COVID than before they give you the real numbers.
Right.
You know why? Because it's a closely held secret. You know why? Because it happened in Florida last week or 2 weeks ago, where they found out that the bars, or what was it? No, I'm sorry.
Nashville.
It happened in Nashville, where the numbers from the bars weren't aligning with what their rhetoric was. Is that correct, Rob?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Nashville, right? Nashville.
Yep.
Nashville, that is a city that depends on bars and music venues more than any other city in the country. They were lying, and they were going against the city's own best interests. I need you to understand, this is how deranged these people are. The head of the health department in Nashville and the mayor's office colluded to lie about what the real numbers were at bars to keep them closed and to collapse the economy in Nashville. And Democrats don't understand that. Fear-minded Democrats. Fear-minded Democrats don't understand that.
Well, then let me.
So the lack of that equanimity, to Todd's point, is that this is why people are in the position that they are in not being able to believe anybody, and they throw their hands up in despair. Okay, and that then at some point turns into anger. Okay, and this is why America is angry. They're angry. They just want to work.
Well,
They
listen.
just want to work.
And let me
Go out and on Saturday night, Rob Knorr wants to take his wife out to dinner, a nice dinner, and maybe a little candlelight dancing in the veranda of the restaurant, and leave me alone.
Well, here's a point.
And let me have a job where I can be able to honestly afford that without having to worry about the fact that the very best restaurant in Clarion County's best restaurant, the steak cost $80, and he doesn't want to worry about that. Don't get in our way. Let us fight.
Well, Carlos, and let me say, right, I did a video a long, long time ago. I don't know if this was March or April. There was a comment.
Videos?
I know, it's crazy, right? There was comments going around on Facebook and Twitter where people were saying something to this, and I'll tie this into today. They would say something like this. Well, the people that are against the lockdowns, they should have to sign a waiver saying if they get COVID, then they're not allowed to be treated at the hospitals. To which my response was, that's fine.
It, right.
My response was, that's fine. I'll sign that waiver. But those of you that embrace the lockdown, if you end up getting an illness that was exacerbated because of the lockdown, or if you lose your financial viability because of the lockdown, how about you sign a statement saying that you're not allowed to receive government help from that? So no stimulus from you, no emergency funding for you, no doctor care for you on issues not related to COVID. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Inhuman.
Right,
that's
weirdly
inhuman. Oh my gosh. You see, you're absolutely right. We deserve to get sick. We deserve to lose everything in our life, but they don't.
Right, so if we deserve to get sick for questioning the lockdown, does that mean that you deserve to lose all of your money for endorsing the lockdown? And that is that what that means? Well, of course not. Then it's different. The same could be said here. If Trump and all of these Republicans deserve to get COVID because of their positions, let's say then that, for example, we know that the CDC, again, an agency that we're told by the left that we have to have the utmost respect and listen to, we know that the director of the CDC over and over and over has said that when it comes to people under the age of 18, COVID is less threatening than the reaction to COVID. In other words, more young people are dying as the results of the lockdowns, of keeping schools closed and things like that, than have died of COVID. So let's just hypothetically say that some governor, has a grandson or a nephew or a niece that tragically would take their own life as the result of the lockdowns. Would any of us dare to say, well, let's just say hypothetically it was Cuomo's, well, Cuomo, you deserve to have your nephew lose their life because you endorsed these lockdowns? Would any of us have the nerve to say that? Yet that's how disgusting these left-wingers are when they're looking at Trump and his family and his team saying, oh, you deserve this because of your actions. They wouldn't even say it about Black Lives Matter. If a bunch of people at a Black Lives Matter rally got sick for violating the social distancing orders, do you think that one of these people would have, the thousands of medical professionals that said, we endorsed the protest under Black Lives Matter because COVID's serious, but white supremacy is more serious. Do you think any of those...
How do we know that they didn't?
Right? Well, they could have. But the point is, though, would the left have said, well, you deserved it. That's what you got for being out there marching. Of course they wouldn't. Their hatred and their disgust for Trump and his family is allowing them to show their true colors. And I'm not saying everyone. I'll tell you right now, I know some Democrats that despise Trump that have personally reached out to me and said, my God, I hope that he lives through this. And that's the right reaction. I'm not saying you have to like the man. You can still hope he loses the election. That's fair, right? That's politics. I get that. But if you're wishing death on someone for a political agenda, you're a disgusting person. And we can see...
Yeah, but it's not just them, it's us. So,
yeah.
I don't feel that we can move forward and have an honest conversation with these people. And so and I've said this on the show many times, life goes on. And I'm going to continue to be the very best person that I can be. I'm going to continue to call it like I see it, loud and proud. And they're going to do what they're going to do, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But I'm not going to make believe that they don't hate us and that they don't wish death on us and they don't wish that we are ruined economically. Okay? This is the revolution that they want. This is exactly what they want. And people who are saying that we're being alarmists and saber rattling haven't been paying attention. I mean, how long was Seattle under the control of CHOP? How long? They don't want to do it. They're peaceful. So, this dishonesty is what nobody in this country can stomach. But we shouldn't be surprised. Like I said in the opening, I'm not surprised. This is who they are. Democrats doing Democrat things. Like, for example, Todd, ex-FBI head James Comey. Tell us your thoughts on what happened this week in the congressional hearings with Mr. Comey.
Either he was channeling his inner Brandon Pardo or Brandon Pardo was channeling his inner Jim Comey. Mm-hmm. Brandon Pardo, head principal, Waynesford Area School District. We'll get into that later on. Comey was the guy that basically was at the head of the spear on running a coup
and didn't
on
know
the
anything.
current administration, and decided he'd send a couple guys over to talk to Flynn, because that's the right thing to do, and tried to lay a perjury trap for Flynn. And then when he was called upon it, having written a book about it, he had selective amnesia. Couldn't remember a damn thing about an investigation he ran on himself. Pretty interesting from the former head of the FBI.
Do you think that there is enough evidence now with all the testimony that he's given for the Justice Department to prosecute him, Rob?
Yeah. There was enough evidence months ago. The Inspector General actually recommended Comey for criminal prosecution way back when he did his report 8-9 months ago for lying to Congress and for also disseminating classified information that he wasn't entitled to public citizens that weren't allowed to have access to that information. Now what we could see is, and I think it was Lindsey Graham made this point at the end of that hearing, where he said the defense for the FBI will be every single person they interview for the FBI saying, yeah, what happened was bad, but it wasn't me. I'm not the one who's responsible. It's someone else.
Right.
And
I didn't know about it.
Yeah, each individual will pass the buck. But there's enough information here that we know that that James Comey was the head of the FBI. Despite how he might try to spin it to the audience, if you watch that, when he signs off on that warrant, for those of you who don't know, he signed off on a warrant to spy on an American citizen, oh, by the way, that happened to be connected to Trump's campaign. Not only that, that warrant that they got would allow them to have access to not only everyone that Carter Page talked to, but everyone that Carter Page's contacts talked to. So it's called the two-hop rule. So basically, this was the legitimization of spying on a presidential campaign and later a president. We now know that they lied, the FBI lied to obtain that warrant over 17 times. And James Comey signed off on that twice. And his response is, oh no, I didn't know anything about that when I signed off on it. Well, I'm sorry, you're the one, the buck stops here with the leadership, and you're the one that should be charged. He's the one that should be held accountable. Now, will it be possible to get a prosecution? We might need to get someone to flip to say, no, James Comey was aware of this. But he should at least be charged.
So, the reason why there's a difference with, after the Attorney General said that he wouldn't prosecute Comey, the reason why the facts have changed is because there was a declassification of certain documents that showed that the FBI knew a lot more than they said that they knew. Is that correct?
Yeah, Carlos. Okay. And give me 1 second, then Rob, you pick up where I leave off. The declassification memo that was just put out recently is so devastating that I believe the last day of September or day before last day of September, Ranking Member Collins asked for current FBI Director Chris Wray to resign. It was that devastating and that damning of what was going on in the FBI at the time of the warrants that you guys were talking about, the FISA warrants in the case that Comey claims he doesn't have any knowledge of. So, Rob, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, and I mean, let's just put yourself in position of the leadership of the FBI. They're investigating one candidate for president, Hillary Clinton, for crimes that she committed with her private server. Then they get this other investigation into the other presidential candidate. So if you're at the head of the FBI, you know this is a defining moment in your organization. These are two of the, not only politically charged, but two of the most important and will be heavily scrutinized investigations you ever do. So let's just take this one area that we now know, or two areas real quick, that just from last week that have been declassified. We now know that the FBI knew that when they're spying on Carter Page, the person they're using, it wasn't just Christopher Steele. Understand, Hillary Clinton paid for Christopher Steele, this British spy, to compile opposition research on Donald Trump. But he didn't actually have any firsthand knowledge. All of his claims were sourced. And the primary place they were sourced from was a guy by the name of Igor Dyshenko, who is a Kremlin agent. He's a Kremlin agent that was under investigation by the FBI, we now know, in 2009. What did he allegedly do? He approached Obama officials that were incoming and said, hey, if you'd like to make some extra money, send me classified information, and I can make you some extra money. He was considered a national security risk by the FBI in 2009, 2010. So the sitting director of the FBI signs off on a warrant exclusively obtainable from information by someone they knew was a Russian spy sending disinformation. And not only that, at the same time that they start this, like a month before, or also in September, at the same time that Comey's signing off on this, two intelligence agents contact Comey, and they say, we're very troubled. We've intercepted information that shows that the Russians believe that Hillary Clinton is making up this lie about Trump colluding with Russians in order to take us off of the Hillary investigation. James Comey claims he doesn't remember that. Now, what I want you to think about is, do you think it's possible that the head of the FBI, and what he knows will be the most scrutinized investigations the FBI has ever done, and most important investigations the FBI's done, where Comey himself admitted he was trying to show that he didn't even want the appearance of bias. He received information from a Russian spy that the FBI believed was a Russian spy, accepted that information to spy on Trump's team without verifying it, while simultaneously ignoring claims that the very person that paid for that information, Hillary Clinton, was intentionally trying to smear Trump as a Russian agent. And his claim is, oh, I forgot. I don't remember that. I don't remember ever being briefed on that, even though we have the documents to prove it. He is clearly lying. This was a coup from the get-go.
Right. And they also caught Strzok in lies also, based on this new information. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, nothing I thought came from it beyond the fact that Comey just denied his way through the whole entire thing. But I think that there's going to be activity and reconsideration of what happened with Comey, because I don't think it's the last. There's another shoe to drop, maybe even more shoes to drop with respect to declassification. And as you already know, Schiff and White House and a couple of others were upset that it was targeted declassification. But of course it's targeted declassification because this is the declassification regarding an investigation of Russiagate. So we're not going to declassify everything. We're going to declassify Russiagate documents and to find out exactly why they investigated this guy and they were so shoddy. And one of my very favorite things, one of my very favorite things that Rob Knorr has ever said is the fact, okay, you got two choices. You were either incompetent or you were corrupt. And if you're not corrupt, you were incompetent. And if you were incompetent, why should we be talking to you? Why should we be listening to you? See, I love that argument, Rob.
Yeah, and let's just be real clear here, right? James Comey.
This is the FBI.
Right, James Comey, who was the head of the FBI.
This is not the Williamsport Lycoming Arts Council.
Right.
This is the FBI.
The most well-funded, powerful investigative agency in the history of the world. The teams that were handpicked by James Comey in the top of the FBI. These weren't entry-level recruits. These were handpicked, supposedly the best of the best at the FBI.
Very best of the best.
Right. James Comey in his whole testimony continually goes back to the IG report, and he mischaracterizes it. He says it over and over. Well, the IG didn't find that we were corrupt, therefore we must not have been corrupt. But
that's not true.
That's not true.
Right.
And first off, the IG definitively proved that there was bias. That all of these agents hated Trump. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them hated Trump. He just couldn't prove that bias influenced their decisions. But keep in mind what the IG is. The IG just does a preliminary investigation. If he thinks there's enough smoke there, then he refers it for criminal prosecution. It is not the IG's job to make a criminal determination. So understand, if you're someone who's just tasked with saying, I'm tasked with seeing if this investigation was on the up and up. He proves definitively it wasn't. He says when he's asked about this in the testimony, and I'm a nerd, and I'm concerned about this coup. I think it's probably the biggest issue in our country, because once you understand there was a coup, now you understand the disinformation on COVID. Now you understand the disinformation on Black Lives Matter and the riots, right? It's all coming from the same deep state cabal. So I do take a lot of interest in this. I watched IG Horwitz's testimony, and when pressed on it, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the only two explanations for the behavior of the FBI was gross incompetence of the highest level or corruption. And he believes it's some sort of mix of the two. Now, for James Comey to take the person who said that and say, aha, see, this exonerates me. It certainly does not. And to go further with this narrative, Todd, I thought this was one of the funniest things I've ever heard. James Comey's defense in this testimony the other day was, well, actually, because remember, the way that Lindsey Graham's pushing this testimony, which is garbage in its own right, is, should we re-up the justification for the FISA courts? Because we've seen such abuse in the FISA application. Should we scrap those FISA courts altogether? That's what this hearing was about. And James Comey's defense of the horrible stuff we saw in the FISA application of Carter Page is, well, actually, the IG looked at 17 other FISA applications, and they were all horribly corrupt, too. That's James Comey's defense. James Comey's saying, oh, no, it's
I
not
wasn't the only corrupt one.
Well, no, but he was in charge of all those applications. So what he's saying is, I can't be corrupt, because if it's just corruption, how can you explain the fact that every time I did this, I was wrong? So clearly I'm just grossly incompetent. I mean, to me, Todd, that was one of the most astonishing defenses I've ever heard. Someone admitting, yeah, every time I touched one of these things, I screwed it up. So how could you say I'm corrupt?
Todd, final thoughts on Comey?
I firmly believe at some point in the near future that former FBI director James Comey will be facing some type of criminal liability.
Who else do you think, if you had a list of people that you think should be authentically charged and prosecuted, give me your top 5, Todd.
Comey, Brennan, McCabe, Strzok, and then any host of number 5, A through C, which would be the
Clappers,
attorney,
right? The
Yates,
Weissmans,
Page, Weissman, anybody down the list would be a 5.
Interestingly enough, Robert, when you go on Twitter and you see this type of question like I just asked, interestingly enough, you know who is never on that list?
I'm gonna guess Barack Obama.
Mueller.
Right. Well, Mueller, you know what, Mueller...
And he certainly should be on that list.
Look, here's the point. We raised our voices when we saw Mueller's team was comprised almost exclusively of people that were fans of Hillary Clinton. In fact, several of which...
40 attorneys that were all given or are registered Democrats and supporters of Hillary Clinton. Imagine that Bill... All 40 of them.
Just real quick, for those of you out there, imagine that Bill Barr puts together a special counsel to investigate Joe Biden, and the council consists of Grinnell and Kellyanne Conway and Chris Christie and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. How do you think that would go? How do you think Sidney Powell, like actual lawyers, grant you, not just talk, but you see what I'm saying? People that have vocally been supporters of Donald Trump. If the entire team investigating Joe Biden in a special counsel was made up of that, do you think the Democrats would have a problem? But we were told when we raised this, what were we told? But the reason it doesn't matter that all of these people behind the scenes are in the tank for Hillary is because Bob Mueller is such a strong leader. He's beyond reproach. He'll do the right thing. He'll do the right thing no matter what. He's sharp as a tack. This guy, man, when you hear him, it's Mueller time. You're going to see, man, this is one of the most impressive people in Washington. And then when you saw him testify, it was just like Joe Biden. It was like, this is a guy past his prime. This is a guy that has no clue what his actual investigation said. And now we see... Okay, I'll just finish. Okay.
If I dare say, it was worse than Biden.
Yeah. And what we saw, who was number 2? It was Andrew Weissman. Andrew Weissman, by the way, who was so much in the tank for Hillary, he attended Hillary Clinton's election night would-be celebration, but ended up being a terrible night for them. But that's who Andrew Weissman was.
Has always been a hatchet man for Hillary.
That's right. And so now Weissman, what's he out there doing last week? What was Weissman out there doing? Throwing Bob Mueller under the bus. Saying, actually, we would have got Trump if Mueller wasn't too weak. So, and I swear, I don't say this often, and you know, Carlos, I despise the argument that, it must not be corruption, it must be incompetence. Honestly, though, one situation where it may apply is Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller may have a defense to criminal prosecution that I was just an incompetent that had no idea what was going on in this investigation. And he's probably telling the truth. He probably had no idea. He was just a figurehead, you know?
It's very compelling, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't in charge. I never was.
And let me
That's
just say...
That's the best defense.
Let me say real quick, like, the one thing that I was appalled that I didn't hear the Republicans ask James Comey has to do with the same thing that I focused on in the Mueller testimony. What was, Todd, Carlos, either of you, what the scope memo that Rod Rosenstein wrote, what was the first thing that Bob Mueller was tasked with investigating? Had nothing to do with Trump. What was it?
Finding out if there was Russian involvement in trying to affect the 2016 presidential race.
Exactly. Now, does that say to help Trump? No, that's not what the scope was, right? It was basically to investigate all accusations of Russian interference in the election, right? That's it.
Right.
Can someone explain why did Bob Mueller? We know that Mueller definitively showed that the Steele dossier was garbage, and we know that Mueller knew that the Steele dossier came from a Kremlin official. We now know that since this week, we now know that Mueller and the FBI knew that that Kremlin official was under investigation as far back as 2009 for damaging U.S. national security. In other words, Bob Mueller and the FBI knew that the claims they were getting and using to spy on Trump's team were from a Kremlin official who it turns out was spreading Russian disinformation.
To investigate on Trump's team.
That's right. So the biggest example of Russian disinformation that was the most effective at causing division and hurting our country was the Kremlin source Steele dossier. That was the biggest example. Why did no one ask James Comey the following question? Mr. Comey, do you think it's possible that the information that was received in the Steele dossier was Russian disinformation? Right? And if Comey, he'll have to say yes, because we know that it was. Then the follow-up question is, do you feel bad that you used your agency at the FBI to disseminate Russian information and cause division in this country? Because Comey's argument is, I'm proud of the investigation. That's what he continued to say. Think of that. It would be the equivalent of this. Remember, one of the things that continually they mentioned to Comey that his agents did was, Kevin Kleinsmith, his lawyer for the FBI, changed an email, changed a piece of evidence to say, the CIA saying, yes, Carter Page was an asset for us getting to arrest Russian officials. They changed it to say, no, Carter Page was not an asset for us. And James Comey continually says, well, I was proud overarchingly of how that was handled. That would be the equivalent of your local chief of police if it turns out that they had a big investigation and they planted drugs on one of the person that they arrested. And then imagine your chief of police saying, yeah, I guess that's kind of bad, but overall, I'm proud of the investigation.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Yep. We got the bad guy. And, of course, the cherry on top is the fact that Mueller, in investigating the fact that they were looking for Russian ties of subverting the election, knowing that the Steele dossier was something that Hillary paid for, didn't investigate her.
Look, my take on this has been real clear from the get-go, and I'm sure
That's the crime, though. That's the crime.
Oh, yeah, and Todd Carlos, let me know if you disagree with this. I don't care that they investigated Trump. I really don't. All I'm asking is that it be equally applied to both sides. If we're going to leave no stone unturned...
With equal fervor.
That's right. If we're going to leave no stone unturned when it comes to Russian interference, then why does it just conveniently, every single time we could see that it benefited Hillary Clinton, the FBI and the Mueller team were like, oh, we have no interest in that Russian interference.
Right.
No, that's beyond our scope.
Right. And here's what the most important part is of the documents that were unmasked last week. It is now clear that this all started because Hillary Clinton proposed an idea of saying that the DNC was hacked by Russia and Trump was behind it to try to take away the onus of all the media attention on her 33,000 emails. That's how this all started.
And let me ask Todd a question, right? So we know from these released documents from Grinnell this week, we know that the accusation that intelligence officials were worried about was the reason Hillary did this was to deflect from the investigation into her email server. In all of your times being a reporter and reporting on criminal investigations, have you ever seen an investigation done like the FBI's into Hillary's, where they gave everyone immunity, smashed evidence, and then said, okay, do any of you have anything you'd like to say? Have you ever seen anything like that?
See Carlos shaking his head right now? The closest thing I can come up with
not
is
at this
Myrtle
level.
Beach.
Right.
Not at this level. But not at this level.
The closest thing is Myrtle Beach.
So,
that's a local level.
Speaking
So
of,
real
Not
quick,
the highest levels of our government.
that's right. And Carlos, let me just finish this thought. So what we were told was Hillary Clinton in July, the intelligence agencies found out that Hillary Clinton was to try to get the FBI off of her investigation, was going to accuse Trump of being a Russian asset.
right.
What do we know actually happened? We know, one, Trump wasn't a Russian asset. And what did the FBI do? Went as light as possible on the Hillary investigation and went as hard as possible on the Trump-Russia. In other words, are we to believe it's just a coincidence that what we know Hillary Clinton wanted to happen exactly to the T happened? They went as easy as possible, skirted the investigation into her, and immediately went into attacking Trump on the Russia investigation.
And
so much so
I'm
that the IG said in his report, remember, the IG did 3 reports. He did one on the Russia investigation. He did one on James Comey individually, and then he did a third one, which was actually the first he did, on the Hillary investigation. He said at the end of that report that he was not confident and could not rule out that bias from agents like Peter Strzok resulted in the prioritizing of the Russia investigation over the Hillary investigation. In other words, exactly what the intelligence agents were saying in July would happen. That's what Hillary wanted to happen. And that's exactly how it played out.
Real quick, before we move on to the debates that I want to spend the rest of the hour on. In your opinion, Rob, do you think that if they declassified all the information as to what the FBI did in the investigation from July 4th of 2016, when Comey went and said that, you know, the emails and he was they're going to start investigating, or, you know, that when it first came out that Comey talked about Hillary Clinton, do you think that any of those or any of that information should be declassified?
It should all. Every single piece of evidence should be declassified.
Because then you can see the evidence that they had vis-a-vis what they did.
That's right. And look.
And then you will see that they didn't do anything at all, given how much information there was, and given that there were 4 people that died who were close to the laptop that Weiner had and Uma Abedin had on their computer with respect to the emails that they had on their computer from Hillary's server.
And let's just be real. Let's make this magnanimous. Let's make this universal. Let's bring our friends in the left on this. Let's bring our friends in the intel community in on this. Isn't Weissman out there right now saying that they should have arrested Trump? That it was only through Bob Mueller's weakness or incompetence that they didn't? So shouldn't Weissman
arrest them for what?
What's
the evidence?
Right? Shouldn't Weissman want a total declass then? Right? Weissman's argument is, we had the goods. Let's see it then, Weissman. Put it all on the table. Leave the American people see it.
Yeah,
why is it that we keep hearing from people like Adam Schiff and people like Weissman, we've seen the evidence of Trump's guilt. Yet every time Trump pushes, well, then let's declassify. Which, by the way, Trump should do more and should declassify. But when Trump allies and people like Grinnell are like, fine, let's declassify stuff, they're the first people that say, oh, no, you can't declassify. Right. What side do you think is on the correct side of history? The side that's saying, let's see it all, let's see all the evidence so people can make up their own mind? Or the side that's saying, no, we can only trust the FBI to release the evidence they feel like through their channels at CNN and the New York Times? That's the only information that we're entitled to. I think that it's quite clear. It should all be declassified.
Speaking of equanimity, let's get into the debate. Your initial thoughts, Todd.
I thought it was 2-on-1. Chris Wallace and Joe Biden against President Trump. And I think he knew that going in. But to watch it unfold in real time, the president.
Okay.
I think he knew that going in. And even to watch it play out in real time was just unbelievable. There is one line in there where former Vice President Biden yells, "Why don't you shut up, man?" My thought to that is he was yelling at the guy in his ear. He wasn't yelling at the president. because he was actually trying to put together a cogent thought. And the noise in his ear on one side was getting in the way, and the noise trying to come in through the other ear. Are you okay, Carlos?
It's so bad. The fact that we're actually talking about the fact that Joe Biden was cheating at the debate. And there's evidence.
It's no different than Donna Brazile giving Hillary the questions before the debate in 2016. It's no different.
Well, I put on Twitter that he might have not gotten the questions, but I think that at the end, at the very last question, if you look at the body language of Joe Biden and the way that he presented himself, okay, his reactionary face, they call it, they have a name for it. It's called the reactionary face. It's the face that you put on when the other person is speaking in a debate. He tilted his body towards the president, and he had this smile that belied that we're going to get you on this one. And go back and look at the tape. It's in the last couple of minutes of the debate. I think he had that last question. I think he knew that was coming, and I believe that was the question of will he transfer power peacefully, and the president basically said no, not if it's not fair. One of the problems that I had with that question is that the president wasn't listening. Chris asked him, if the results of the election are fair and square, will you accept those things? And the president should have retorted with, only if the conditions of the election are indeed fair and square. That's what he should have said. But he wasn't listening. He went right to, well, if there's cheating, and if we find out that there were some, I think he said 10,000 votes or something, tens of thousands of votes, that this thing is going to be off, then no, I'm not going to accept it. And we're going to fight it. So Biden knew that question was coming. But what were your other thoughts on the debate, Todd?
So, having moderated debates previously,
right,
it's the job of the moderator to ask the question. If you want to do a preface of a question, that's fine. Get out of the way.
Mm.
You're not the show.
Right. Be a hockey referee.
Get out of the way.
And let's be honest. Wallace is out there on his high horse talking about how this was Trump's fault. Look, go back and watch the beginning of the debate, right? I encourage everyone. The first 2 minutes, Trump speaks uninterrupted. Then Biden speaks 2 minutes uninterrupted. Then Trump, and Wallace even says, now it's kind of the interaction time. Okay, so Trump starts talking. Biden interrupts Trump 3 times when Trump starts talking. But it's not off the rails. It's kind of normal stuff you'd expect. That's not true. Stuff like that. Interrupting Trump, no big deal. Then Biden starts. Trump reciprocates in a very similar manner. No, that's not true. Who is it that starts it going off the rails? It's Chris Wallace. Because Wallace, right. That's when Biden interrupted Trump, no big deal. And you expect, like we all said here, get out of the way, let them go, right? But it wasn't until Wallace stopped in, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President. You could see at that point, Trump was like, oh, this is how it's going to be? You're going to let him interrupt me, but when I do the same thing reciprocal, you're going to say be quiet. So everyone's like, Trump interrupted Biden 50 times and Biden interrupted Trump 20. Yeah, but how many times did Wallace interrupt Trump? And that's more important because Wallace theoretically is the person running the debate. And so for me...
I have that number.
Good. Yeah. That's where it went off the rails.
I have that number. Would you like to know what the number is?
Yeah.
76 times.
Yep. Yeah.
Would you like to know the number that he interrupted Biden? 15.
Right. So that was the real problem. And that's where it started to go off the rails. Now, let me say my thoughts. I think Trump could have done better. I think that Trump was right to be aggressive, but you could be aggressive in a way that sounds more magnanimous. So I think that, he could have done better. Go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
He had early onset of COVID.
Well, that's true too. But that's true. But I'm just talking, all reasoning beside the general feelings of the debate. I thought that Trump could have done better, but as Carlos, as you know, oftentimes I do these debates where it's 8 people and a moderator, and it's usually me versus a moderator and 8 people.
Yeah, no, you friggin' make me nervous when you do that. Okay, you give me agita and you destroy people and I love you as a brother, but I just can't watch them because you wreak havoc on these people.
But I forget,
and it's excruciating to watch when you just destroy these people.
But
I mean,
to my Latino
you
brother,
just rip them up and dismember them, and I'm like, I can't watch this.
To my Latino brother,
this.
they asked Latinos
Yep.
after the debate. They polled them. Who won the debate, Trump or Biden? More than 60% of respondents went for Trump.
and that was on Telemundo, which is
On Telemundo.
Do you
Spanish.
understand why? You understand why? Because that's how Latinos fight. That's how we argue. That's how we debate.
so. Let me just give you real quick
You're telling me.
my overarching feelings on what the lasting impression of the debate will be, and then we can talk more about the specifics. 3-4 weeks from now, or heck, let's even go a year from now. You know what people will remember from this debate? It was ugly, and Trump bullied around Trump. Basically, Trump stood over Biden. Biden was someone who seemed weak. Trump was someone who seemed strong. But there's more to it than just that. I think another thing, is anyone shocked? Is there one vote out there that was lost for Trump because now there's Trump people like, I was going to vote for Trump, but it turns out he's kind of a aggressive jerk. Is that news to anyone? Is there anyone out there like, geez, I had no idea Trump had such a combative streak in him? I don't think that's news to anyone. However, you know how many friends I have on the left that like, Joe Biden's this calm, soothing presence. You still think that after the debate? Because what it seemed to me was Biden tried to be Trump, but just wasn't as good as Trump as Trump is.
Right. No.
So the only thing that...
And you're not going to be able to do that.
That's right. So the only impressions you get is, when it comes to a battle of 2 people trying to be the alpha, Trump won that battle. And to all the people that think, oh, Joe Biden, we don't want an alpha. We want someone who can bring people together. Joe Biden wasn't that either. Say what you will about Trump, he wasn't calling Biden a clown. He didn't say, shut up, man. Things like that. So Biden doesn't come off looking good,
That aside, and the Latinos, the way that Latinos fight and argue aside, let me make my case. Who won on explaining COVID?
Trump.
Who won on the economy?
Trump.
Who won on judges?
Definitely Trump.
Who won on business?
Yeah, Trump.
Who won on law and order?
Trump.
Who won on getting Biden to reject the Green New Deal?
Yeah, I agree.
Who won on healthcare?
That's a wash. I don't think Trump did very good on healthcare.
Who won on defund the police?
Definitely Trump.
Who won on making one person make the other person distance himself from the radical left and Bernie supporters?
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
Who won?
It was Trump.
Who won? Okay.
But that's not going to... I know people think that that's an issue. That's not an issue. There ain't one Bernie supporter... They know...
I'm sorry. It came up in the debate, so it is an issue.
Listen,
Sorry, I didn't make the rules.
best thing that I've heard Trump say, and Scott Adams said that this was the single best answer to a gotcha question probably in history. Did you see Donald Trump on Hannity denounce white supremacy? Did you both see that?
It's for 4 years.
Okay, but this is what he says. I denounce white supremacy. I denounce the KKK. I denounce the Proud Boys. I don't know what they are, but I denounce them anyways. That is such a hilarious and awesome answer. Because basically what he's saying is, it's all garbage. He knows it's all garbage.
Right.
He said, "Oh, you say someone's evil? Sure, I denounce them. I don't know who they are, but I denounce them." Now, me and you and Todd, we all understand. Do you think the Proud Boys are upset with that answer? They're not. You want to know why? Because they're as smart as us. They know what Trump said. They know that Trump basically said, "Sure, if that's what you want me to say, I'll say it."
Right.
That's exactly how the
and
AOC...
they've come out with videos saying so.
That's right. But that's exactly how AOC and the Green New Deal people feel about Biden's answer. They know that Joe Biden has to say that. But he didn't lose one supporter of the Green New Deal by distancing himself from it. They know...
Who won in being able to make him look bad to people other than AOC?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you could theoretically say that there are moderates out there that are like, "Oh, Joe Biden's distanced himself from AOC. That's good." Even though he didn't. So, theoretically, Biden could have won on that? I don't know.
So, of all the things that I just mentioned, Trump is the decisive winner of the debate. Decisive. We didn't even get to have questions on trade or foreign policy or ISIS or shutting down the caravans. You remember those? You know why they didn't bring him up? Because that's Trump's forte. But let's go back to what isn't Trump's forte. That day, it came out that Hillary Clinton was the author of the Russiagate idea of pinning Russia and on Trump. That day, no questions. Not to mention that last week, this exact person, Hillary Clinton, was the one that went on Twitter and said, quote, "Do not concede under any circumstances," end of quote. Nothing in debate about that. Nothing about Black Lives Matter to Joe Biden. Nothing about Antifa. But we had, are you ready for this? What are the kitchen table issues? The economy, law and order, education. But we featured Donald's taxes, questions about race, climate change, Breonna Taylor, Chancellorsville, white supremacists. Listen, when I was a little boy, we mocked them. They showed up with more flags than people.
Who's they?
The white supremacists. They still do. They have more flags and vile accoutrements than they do people. It's a lie. I'm sorry, let me retract that. It's a damned lie. We are paying a horrible price because journalism doesn't exist anymore. The biggest mistake that this country made is not permitting Joe Rogan to run this debate, because we would really get to see, we would really get to eyeball exactly who these men are.
It'll never happen. And look, these debates, here's the thing.
But
I agree. I agree. But the problem,
you really want to do this?
Right.
Then that's how you do it.
But listen, here's what I was telling people before the debate. You want to hear?
And one more. I'm sorry. I apologize. Nothing on packing the courts. As a matter of fact, what did he say about packing the courts? I'm going to serve this up to you, Robert. Tell me, please, what he said about packing the courts, Biden, when he was asked.
He said he refuses to answer the question.
Why?
What was his? He refused to answer the question because
then it becomes an issue.
Right.
You're damn right it does, Joe. That's your job.
Right.
We need clarity on that specific issue. That's why Carlos Saldivia voted for Donald Trump. Judges. And when I did vote for Donald Trump on Supreme Court justices and judges, I had no guarantee that he was going to do that. I was praying that he wasn't going to be one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, just like you and me, or Todd. Okay, we were praying the God that he turned around and he appointed good judges.
But okay, so real quick on the Rogan thing. Here's the thing. Here was what I said. You go back and watch what I said before the debate on what to expect. I said the irony is Chris Wallace would probably be the closest to a centrist moderator that we'd see, and he would be horrible. And that's true. What's the guy's name, Todd, that's moderating the next debate? That was an intern for Joe Biden?
His name escapes me, but you're spot on with the intern.
You know, so that's the irony. And here's the dirty little truth. If you're conservative out there, here's the truth. We have been talking about corruption and bias in the media ever since I've been alive. 30 years, right? This is the options that I was explaining this to a friend yesterday. I'm like, so here's the deal. Here's the position Donald Trump is in. Who wanted the debates, Trump or Biden? Trump. Because why? It's finally his chance to talk to millions of people that otherwise only get their information through mainstream sources. That it's constantly Trump evil, Trump evil, Trump evil. Now he gets a chance to actually show how ridiculous that position is. But the problem is, the way the Democrats have over the years set this up is, your moderators, they switch what they call the Overton window, which is the relevant area of discussion.
Right,
so you would think, oh, well, we got left wing and right wing and then center. That's where we have discussion. This is what they've done. They've shifted that so far left, which on my screen looks right, so let's go that. They've shifted it so far left. But the moderation, it's even worse than that. So your moderation, the most extreme right-wing person you could get would be a left-leaning centrist, like Chris Wallace. That's as extreme far right-wing as you'll get it, right? Everyone else, then you could go to a moderator that's like Rachel Maddow. She would be considered, that's how insanely left-wing you could have in the tank for a moderator. The problem is, if Trump's like, I refuse to accept this. If you're going to have Joe Biden's intern, I want Joe Rogan, or I want Sean Hannity. The Democrats would be, see, Trump chickened out. He's unwilling to do it with the moderators that we've recommended. But this has been a symptom. This is just the culmination of what we've seen happening for 30 years. Journalism has skewed so far to the left that to find someone who's just a little bit Democrat, that's like, oh my God, what an insane right-winger Chris Wallace is. And so now we're stuck with this situation where you just saw how biased Chris Wallace was. I will guarantee you, if we have the rest of these debates, that was nothing. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Wait until you see what people working for the Washington Post or CNN are capable of. And that's what we're dealing with. Imagine for a moment that we had a media that was anywhere close to being objective. How bad do you think that Trump would be crushing it right now?
Well, I hate to be the person that brings this up, Rob, but the answer lies right here, right in front of us. Todd Bartlett is a center-right conservative, in my humble opinion. Okay, he's center-right. Experience has taught me that Todd Bartlett, as a center-right person, I trust him more to be completely and utterly fair to everybody more than anybody that I know personally. So if I take that model that I know and inject it into national politics, I can see Brett Baer be a better moderator.
Oh yeah, he would have been way better moderator.
For everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I can see
Brit Hume would have been better.
Brit Hume.
Yep.
Molly Hemingway. There's not a lot of them, but I trust them more than I would trust most of the people on the left. And there's like, what,
But
you know,
that's
the
just
guys that we watched like Matei.
Aaron
See,
Matei and yeah.
I would trust an Aaron Matei. I know he's on the left, like completely on the left, but I trust him. I'm sorry, I trust him. Dave Rubin, I trust him. I trust them because they're honest people. They're on the left, but they're honest people. And it takes one to know one. Honest people know and see other honest people and know them.
But and that's exactly my point, though. What do you think the incentive is for the Democratic Party to ever accept an honest moderator?
Well, you fight. You fight and you negotiate one of those honest people.
They'll just say, we're not going to do the debates. They'll just say, no, these are the moderators or we're not going to do it. And they control the narrative, so they control that these are the respected moderators, and you're unwilling to accept them.
Put out the memo like the left does, that this is what they did and they don't care about the country.
Who's going to be pushing that memo? Fox News? Are they going to push the memo that Chris Wallace was unfairly biased? They're not even Tucker.
I understand that, but like, you know, we're either going to get on the plan and we're going to fight or we're not. You and me and Todd are going to fight. And the object of the show is for people to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet and fight for themselves, because no one's going to come and save them. Okay? But that's the object of what we're doing here. You must fight because there's no one coming to save you.
I don't disagree with you, but here's the problem. This was not a fight for now.
You're telling me that you've never won a debate when you had someone on the left moderating the debate.
Right.
Every single debate that you moderated was moderated by someone on the left.
Right. And here's the problem. This is the fight you're talking about is the fight we should be having for 4 years from now. It is not a fight you have 2 weeks before the debate because we all know this. Every single one of us said the debate will be good for Trump. Biden will try to get out of the debate. And any excuse, if Trump would have came out and been like, no, I don't like these moderators, the narrative would have been Trump backed out of the debate. He knew that Joe Biden was going to blow his doors up, so he refused to accept these moderators. And it doesn't matter that people like me and you would have known it was garbage. The vast majority of independent people would be like, well, the debate commission came up with what they said would be fair moderators, and one person backed out and the other didn't. Therefore, the one that backed out must be afraid. That would have been the narrative. And so it's unfortunate. Like, for example, do you think Trump's going to get a fair shake if he does this next debate? No. But he can't back out. He has to go. And so he has to be prepared to understand. You will be debating 2 people. You will be debating the moderator. You'll be debating the debate commission. You'll be debating the audience. If there's an audience that makes noise, they'll skew towards Joe Biden. You'll be debating
I will give you this. That was the very best thing about the debate.
That they didn't allow
this.
Yeah. They were there,
very
I think,
best
but
thing.
they were silent.
It removed the distraction.
But Rob, if anybody's going to back out of a debate, Trump's got the ultimate excuse in 2020.
Well, that's right.
COVID.
That he does. But, you know, to me, he doesn't need to back out. There are ways. He did fine. Exactly. He did okay. I think he left a lot on the table. But there are ways he could do this better. Like, he could be funny about it. Remember when in the 2016 when they said something about, saying terrible things about women and he was like, only Rosie O'Donnell? It was a great line, right? Because he was funny and made his point of the absurdity of the question at the exact same time, right? So what Trump needs to do, my advice if I'm instructing Trump, the first thing I'm telling him is the person you're going up against is a word salad machine. If you let him talk for more than a minute, he's going to say something really dumb. So let him go. Don't interrupt him. Just let him go.
Don't interrupt him. Right.
And then when he finishes, you stick to certain point. It almost doesn't matter. Whatever the question the moderator asks you, answer it in 20 seconds and then get to your offensive point. Oh, Trump, your tax returns, blah, blah, blah. Yes, as I told you what was released shows I didn't commit any crime, and it proved that I was under audit, as I said. Now, if we're concerned about finances, what about Joe Biden being vice president and being in charge of countries like Ukraine and China while his son was getting millions of dollars? If we're so concerned with Russian money, what about Joe Biden's son getting $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? And then watch Biden go, how dare you ask me about that? Blah, 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 blah. And then watch Chris Wallace go, oh, Mr. Trump, we'll get to that to the next question. Because did you notice that every time Trump landed a blow, Wallace would step in and say, no, we'll discuss that later. And then they know. So then what Trump should do, the next question, sit there politely, and when it gets back to him, go, thank you, Chris. Would you like to take a seat next to Biden? I see you're playing defense for him, so if you want to be his debate partner, by all means, we'll get someone to run a stopwatch from the crowd. You go over there. Now, back to the question. You spent 4 years alleging that I was a stooge of Putin. Care to explain how your son was getting $3.5 million from a Moscow mayor's wife? Oh, you're muted, Carlos. That's how Trump should play this.
But that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about, specifically in the deep dive here. Okay? And from a media point of view, your comments too, Todd.
Well, before you get to the deep dive.
No. On this specific thing.
Like,
what did Biden say about his son with respect to the Ukraine and taking money from China and taking money from the mayor's wife, the billionaire wife of the mayor of Moscow? That it was all a lie. And we still haven't had anybody write any stories about Joe Biden saying that, because that in itself, what Joe Biden said, is the lie. Is that not true?
good.
Yeah, and then what was a conceded point by Joe Biden was when Trump challenged him on the drug addiction, right? His son's drug addiction, dishonorably discharged, and the whole time he's saying this, Joe's going, it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. Well, as soon as Joe then...
Well, it is a lie that he was dishonorably discharged. I mean, the circumstances under which he was dishonorably discharged were dishonorable, but he wasn't dishonorably discharged. He was discharged, but not dishonorable. I don't really know the details because he was an officer, but what people don't understand and what the president should have said is that Joe Biden got in the way of the decision from the Department of the Navy as to what the discharge was, number one. But what the president should have said is, why is it a lie? Made, like Robert said, go into the word salad surgery aspect of this and let him explain why it was a lie. Is that not correct, Tom?
But to go back to Trump's initial posit was the fact that he had a drug issue. It's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. And then Joe says, well, my son did have a drug issue or has a drug issue, this, and the other. So he conceded the point on the drug issue.
Well, he shouldn't have said that, because that's not what you really want to say, that he had a drug issue. You say that he was released from the Navy because he was doing drugs. See the difference?
Even that.
No, I totally get it. Now let me give you a card now in Trump's deck that he has that nobody else on that stage is going to have. You ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
And I want everybody to put in the back of their minds and just kind of mull this around for later. You remember the character Khan in the Star Trek series?
Yes.
On TV and the movies
my favorites,
and then the reboot, right? Just remember Khan for a minute.
From hell's heart, I spit at thee.
Right? Just remember Khan, and he's got like super blood, right? That's like a thing. He's got super blood.
Tiger blood.
So when they asked Trump in the second debate about COVID and he's recovering and everything else, try this on. He says, well, now since I've had it, I have antibodies. So if my opponent gets it, you could synthesize my blood and I could cure my opponent because I have super blood.
Right.
Can you even imagine the media getting that kind of an answer from the sitting president of the United States? Can you even imagine their response?
He would just be trolling them at that point.
I mean, are you kidding me?
It's a good line.
Trump blood. It's Trump blood.
And it's legit. It's legit because if you have it and you shed the virus, arguably you have antibodies.
Right. So
let
your
me
thoughts, Todd, Rob?
I want to hear Rob's in real time response to the tiger blood thing.
Well, no, I think it's a great. Trump will do something like that. It might not be that, but Trump will make a claim if he survives this and does the debates that he's somehow some superhuman in some regard. He beat this. He will, and it will be intentionally
because
trolling.
America is great.
Right, and he'll.
Right.
That's right, and it'll be funny. Now, let me make a point, right? That I think that Trump. Hopefully, he would listen to me, and that, just a suggestion that I have for Trump and other people out there, and it's this: I don't care at all about Hunter Biden's drug use. Zero. I don't care at all that Hunter Biden took money from Russians. I don't care that he took money from Ukrainians. I do in a slight sense, but that's not the issue. And Carlos, you were getting to the heart of the issue. The issue is, what did Joe Biden do in a position of power regarding those things? So, Burisma paying Hunter...
Allow it.
Not just allow it, covered up for it. Right? So, for example, an oligarch that's allegedly corrupt, not according to me, according to Joe Biden, according to Barack Obama. The person, what was his name? Zlochevsky, that ran Burisma. He was supposedly a corrupt, pro-Russian Ukrainian oligarch. Joe Biden was tasked, specifically in the Ukraine, with ending corrupt oligarchs in the Ukraine. That was Joe Biden's job. At that exact point in time, his son was getting paid money, millions of dollars by this corrupt oligarch. So the way Trump needs to phrase this is, because the counterattack's going to be, well, Trump's slandering his children. But that's not the issue, and Trump should be quite clear. We're not even saying what Hunter Biden did. We're looking at that. What we're looking at is, what did Joe Biden do with his position as vice president when he knew his son was taking possible illegal money from a corrupt oligarch? You know what he did? He used $1 billion of your tax dollars to force the prosecution in Ukraine to shut down looking at his son. What did Joe Biden do when a Russian mayor's wife was giving Hunter Biden $3.5 million? What did Joe Biden do in China when billion-dollar contracts from the CCP were going to Hunter Biden? And then furthermore, seeing as how his son has those financial ties, how would that affect a Joe Biden presidency? We saw that Joe Biden had no problem when he was vice president allowing his son to go to adversarial countries, even to specific people that Joe Biden himself was saying was criminal, and receiving millions of dollars from them. Do we think it's a conflict of interest? And then the next line of attack needs to be, because Joe Biden's gone on record saying this, he said, well, you don't have to worry about that. If I'm president, my children won't be doing any business like that internationally. Oh, so you recognize that it's a problem? So it wasn't a problem when you were vice president, but now all of a sudden you're going to put your foot down when you're president? Right. What's the difference?
It's
Why
laughable.
was this acceptable when you're vice president? And
it's laughable.
Right, and the reason that this makes sense, the reason this should matter to all of you out there is the following. Two things. One, the entire tax argument against Trump from the get-go, as I said it was, and now you see it morphing into this, was they wanted to look at those taxes, and if Trump, an international billionaire businessman, ever did business in Russia, they would say, aha, that's proof. He's a stooge of Putin. Why would that be proof? What's the shocking news story here? International businessman does business internationally? What the hell is that? What's that story? That's nothing.
Right.
So if they want to make such, and they're still doing that, where did Trump get this $400 million loan? Was it from Russians?
Right.
Is he beholden to, if that's their line of attack, he needs to be like, okay.
Deutsche Bank.
Right.
Deutsche Bank.
Right. You're talking and again, this is what the Democrats always do. They look at the other side and says, hypothetically, you could do X, which would be very troubling. Meanwhile, they're doing X. Right? So they do X.
Another example of what you say all the time. Exactly what they do is what they accuse the opposition, conservatives, that they're doing.
Right.
Exactly what exactly. No, I mean exactly what they do.
Right. So they're worried that
with Hillary Clinton, with Comey, with Strzok, with Flynn, with Mueller, with Russia, with Hunter Biden. It's exactly what they do. And it's amazing to go and have a deep dive into their minds in how they do this. But my very favorite, most satisfying part of it is how far and long ago you've been talking about these exact things for a year. I've known you for a year and a half, right? Coming up on a year and a half.
Yep.
And you've been talking about this, literally these exact things, for a year and a half.
Yep.
Literally. It's almost like you can predict what they're going to say next. And every single time you do, we're always referring to this conversation at this point that I'm saying, well, Rob said that. Rob said that. Rob said that. He allowed it. And that's the issue. That's what you're saying.
Right.
And by allowing it, that means that there's corruption and that there's double standards. And listen, the debate, I'm sorry, I respect you when it comes to debates more than anybody I know. But listen, this debate wasn't even close. It wasn't even close in terms of how I broke it down,
well, that's the substance.
Okay. Right. The other stuff for me was just guys trying to take their jerseys and pull it over each other's head so you could pound them. This is the hockey guy.
Right.
Okay. I understand that completely. So that's why I view it differently. Okay, than you would view it from a purist debate standpoint of view. But I don't think that, and here's the point, Todd and Rob, I don't think that that's going to fundamentally change.
No, that's the point.
The president can only get better and kind of take the stuff that Rob is saying to him and shut up, make his points. It's almost like what is it? What's that snake? That cobra. It's a boom, 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 and be quiet. Boom and be quiet. Boom and be quiet. And it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse because they're gonna try to do some stupid things. And when you have nothing to offer from a position of policy, I mean, I can't tell you one. And it's kind of my job to show the other side sometimes. I can't tell you one. And even on healthcare, the president could have devastated those guys.
Let me get Carlos real quick, right? I hear you're making promises about healthcare there, Biden. Were you part of the administration that said if you like your doctor, you could keep it? How long did that take? 10 seconds? That's devastating. What's Biden going to say? Why would you?
It's a body blow.
Right, and if Trump should just be like, maybe you're sitting there thinking, hey, Joe Biden's plan sounds reasonable with healthcare. Why would you believe a word this man says? That's it.
Rob, he was saving it for later.
Yeah, well,
he had to have been.
Right.
He was saving it for later.
We'll come back to it.
Todd, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you remember much of the first debate between Trump and Hillary?
Oh, he destroyed her. Absolutely destroyed her.
But I don't remember any of the big moments from that. You know what I remember? The second and third. Right?
Second and third.
And I think Trump did better in the second, even though he did very good against Hillary in the first. I think he did better in the second and third debates.
But historically, presidents do that.
Right.
Presidents historically do better in the second and third.
And remember, the second one was the town hall. And remember when she got the mic and she goes, and it would be crazy if you're the person that's running the free world and this and that. And good thing that you don't have your hand on the button or the hands of the scales of justice. And then he goes, because you'd be in jail.
Right. Brilliant.
I mean, it was the go-to line of the debate.
Right.
It was over.
And can I say one more point, Carlos, talking about the overarchingness of this debate? Remember, there is part of us, not us that watch it a lot, but just the average person. They kind of expected Joe Biden, I think, and a lot of people did, to kind of literally fall on his face. Like literally have to be carted out in a wheelchair. That's how bad Biden, right? That's how bad Biden's coming. Right? So it was always going to be a win, quote unquote, moral victory for Biden if he managed to make it an hour and a half and not fall down on stage, right? But instead of saying, well, I guess in that sense Biden did better than expected. How about we look at this? Todd, how many days did Biden put a lid on his campaign in September?
15.
15, right? And what were we told? He was preparing for the debate. I just want to ask you,
September?
take Trump out of the equation. You watch Joe Biden. There's a man who spent more than 2 weeks preparing for that one debate. Impressed? You impressed with that? There's a man that's... Meanwhile, Trump was out working not only as president, but campaigning every single day. And we now know had COVID. So if you look at it in that context, it's like... So wait a minute. Imagine that you spend... It would be the equivalent of this. You and your roommate are in college. One roommate goes to work every day, goes to class every day, and he's getting hammered in the evening. The other roommate studiously studying for 2 weeks, and they both get a C on the test. Wouldn't you be like, damn, that guy that studied, not very bright. If he spent 2 weeks preparing for that, and that's the effort that he mustered, not good.
Well,
go ahead, Todd.
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, I just have a question for the Biden campaign. If your ads all say the plan has failed, right? We got to have a plan. You're now debating the guy that put a plan in place on the fly from a virus we'd never seen before, and now he's recovered from the virus. If anybody's going to know how to deal with it going forward, is it the guy that's had it and recovered, or the guy that just talks about it? It's called empirical knowledge. Certain people here locally love to throw around empirical knowledge about how they have empirical knowledge on certain topics just because. Well, if you're going to have that kind of credit and you're going to take that kind of ownership of it, are you going to give credit to the president because he's now had and recovered from COVID? It's just a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer.
So, to your point, by the way, Rob, to your point about what you said regarding the studious guy, the credentialed guy, when credentials come up and they are when credentials and perceived intelligence comes up to in the battlefield to the self-negotiated spontaneous order, the spontaneous order on the battlefield always wins, which is why the president with "you'd be in jail" comment, see, you can't prepare for that. But speaking of preparing, tell me from your experience in debate, what would you tell Joe Biden?
So if I'm trying to help Joe Biden win?
Yes.
So I would
or get better, not win.
Right, right.
That's too much of a thing. But how do you prepare Joe Biden to do better?
So if you're debating someone, and I debate people that stylistically tend to be more like Trump, right? Where they want to try to be an alpha and try to bully you, and not saying that Trump's exclusively doing that, but you see what I'm saying. What he needs to do is be more witty and sarcastic, right? Like, instead of just being like, come on, man, shut up, or you're a clown, or stuff like that. Just say things like, are you finished? Mr. Trump, or President Trump, would you like to actually hear my response? Would you like to hear that? Like, you had your say on COVID, let me give my response, right? If you want to keep interrupting, we'll just take that as acknowledgement that I'm giving an answer that you don't know how to deal with. Right?
Without losing your temper.
Right. So to try to be calm like that. The other things are that I think that Joe...
But on substance, how you would make... how would you make him be better?
Well, real quick, just stylistically, the other point that I think that Biden needs to do more of, and I think Trump needs to do, which I believe we'll see Trump do this better than Biden, be conciliatory to certain things. Because otherwise you come off as disingenuous. So, for example, Joe Biden could say something to this effect. Yes, this was an unprecedented virus, and we understand how it was difficult. And so I do understand, Trump, and I commend you for trying to do things that you thought would be good. But here's where I think you went wrong. Or, Trump, yes, I commend you. The jobs numbers were very good before the virus. But because of your mishandling of that, I think that we'll see a slower recovery. You know what I mean? But make it sound like... And to me, one of the definitive moments in the debates in 2016 was the last question at the last debate. And I've talked to you about this, Carlos. I forget who the moderator was, but they asked Hillary and Trump, can you say something positive about your opponent? And Hillary said Trump's got a nice
remember.
family, which is a non-answer. That's like saying, no, I can't say anything positive about
Yeah,
it.
he seems like he has a very nice family.
Right. Trump said, I think this is a woman who might disagree with her causes, but she has fought her whole life for these causes. And she's a fighter, and she's achieved victories, and I truly do respect that about her. And that was heartfelt. What that showed you was, this is a man who's not just spewing BS to win an election. He actually can admit, here's when my opponent did something good. Someone who's just trying to win an argument will take every single thing you say and just say, wrong, 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 wrong. So both Trump and Biden...
Honesty is an important factor when you're debating.
Right. Because you have to understand, the sad truth is, first off, I don't even know if the debates matter. 90-something% of people have their minds made up already, or it'll be something outside of debate that changes their mind. But
I'll address it in the close.
Right. So when you're looking at the debate specifically, sadly, I think substance is far less important than stylistically, right? And people, especially now when we're so divided, you have to understand, they're doing two things. Driving out their base, right, which is probably more important, but also trying to get undecided and moderate people. And the way you reach those undecided and moderates is to show, look, I can admit that it's possible for me to acknowledge that my opponent has some good ideas and that I would be willing to work with them. By the way, you see Joe Biden's team doing this right now. Do you see his newest ad that said, I'll work for you regardless if you vote for me or not. I'm trying to, bring all Americans in. That's the argument that
I'm the president of the people. Right?
That's right. Now, like substance-wise, what could Biden be doing? There's room to attack Trump on COVID response. I think the big response would be, you seem
and it's not racism, by the way.
Right. Like, you seem to waffle. It seemed like one day you supported lockdowns. The next day you were against lockdowns. We still haven't received the rapid testing, which you could blame governors and you could blame Congress, but you're in charge and that you could have done better on that. Right. And so there's room to do that. I think that healthcare is a good attack. I don't think that Trump, I think that, yes, lowering prescription drug costs are important. But remember, largely thanks to Mitch McConnell, when Trump wanted to address healthcare in 2018, what did McConnell say? No. We don't want to talk about healthcare in the midterm. So that's an issue. So there are substantive things to attack Trump about. But they're going about it. There's far more. The truth is, there's far more substance that's just objectively true for Trump to run on than Joe Biden. Because at the end of the day, Donald Trump could always say the most impactful line, which is, you were in office for 40 years. You didn't do anything. So why would we believe you on substance now? You could sit here and talk in your blue in the face about how you're going to change X, Y, and Z. You haven't done any of that in 40 years. That's it. That's devastating.
You had your shot, and this is what you've allowed. Todd, how would you help Joe Biden?
Tell him to retire.
Is this a serious question?
It is.
How would I help Joe Biden?
Yeah, from a media point of view. Yeah.
Well, how's he going to answer any questions when he's running on record? He was part of 8 years of the Obama administration who ran a coup.
No, I know. Don't tell me why you can't help him. Tell me why you can.
I can't.
So you think that he is...
I don't think... I'm telling you.
You think that he's completely lost?
No question. He's not even the real candidate.
And you don't think that there's anything that he could say to regain any type of credibility?
With me?
In general?
Not with me. Not with me. Not when you have the governor of Pennsylvania holding back-to-back press conferences on the ACA.
Right.
The only reason he's doing that is because the nominee, the actual candidate, flubbed the response.
Right.
So we're 30 days out, and we don't know if we're going to have in-person voting beyond 25 people in a polling place from a Democrat governor? No, I can't help him. I'm sorry.
Right.
You go back and watch that debate. Take Donald. If you could edit the debate. In fact, maybe I'll do this. Edit the debate to just Joe Biden talking. It is truly pathetic. What did he say in substance?
It is.
He didn't say anything.
Which is part of the reason why I'm asking you, how does someone help them?
He's
and where does he come if there is a second and third debate? What does he do?
Go ahead, Todd.
He's actually parroting his opponent. Build back better.
Right.
You're going to do it better?
Because he doesn't have anything to offer to begin with, policy-wise.
And then the ad that they're running now is, well, we're going to take from the rich to give to the poor. Where have we heard that before? Because that works, right? If you have a job, we're going to give you $14,000 more a year in your job. Where's that money coming from? It's absolute nonsense.
Here's the truth,
right? The ad that they're running. So no, to go back to your fundamental question, first of all, I wouldn't help him. Second of all, he's unhelpable.
And look, Carlos, we talked about this. I met Carlos, for those of you who don't know, running for Congress in a special election. And I've talked to Carlos a lot about that election. One of the reasons it was so easy for me to run, this is going to blow your mind, as someone who was running as a politician, was I just told the truth. I just said what I thought. I talked to people that despised some of my positions, and I knew they would. I'm running in the most conservative district in Pennsylvania. I don't mind gay marriage. I was hung up more times than you can imagine, people slamming the phone because they didn't want to hear that opinion. But it was easy to run, because if I was in a debate or if I was talking to people, I didn't have to say, how do I placate this area of my base versus I don't want to go too far and upset this area. What does Joe Biden, and I say this all the time, one of the reasons I feel I'm good at debates because I happen to pick the correct positions. I don't know, even as the most skilled debater, how you could accept Joe Biden's position at this point. Somehow you have to placate the most radical people in the country while telling the other half of the country, no, I'm a totally moderate dude. How do you do that? Especially when you've been in Congress or been in politics for 47 years and done nothing. So you somehow have to run on substance while appeasing the most radical communist socialists that our country's ever seen and convincing the rest of the country that you're a moderate. That's why the best strategy for Joe Biden is survive the debates and let every institution that is in the bag for the establishment and for Joe Biden do your arguing for you. That's the only chance. That's Joe Biden's chance. Joe Biden's banking on the fact that the media and the entertainment industry and Silicon Valley and academia are going to lie and censor and back him and smear everyone connected to Trump in every way possible. That's Joe Biden's path to the election. It's not issues. It's not him and that he's a charismatic person. It is, please God, let these institutions do the work for me. That's his chance to win.
The bigotry of low expectations, as you say all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, he performed. He just did okay. He survived. It's okay. Here's where we are with Democratic issues that I pulled from Amanda Waldman's page on Facebook. Amanda Waldman is running against Joe Ham in the 84th. I wrote a pretty direct and clear screed making my case against Joe Ham. I'm a Republican, and so is Joe. I do not support him. But this is something that I pulled from his opponent's page, Amanda Waldman. The Rural Bill of Rights. You guys ready? The Rural, R-U-R-A-L, Bill of Rights. Guess what number 1 is? Anybody? Ready? Healthcare. Guess what number 10 is? Number 10. Ready?
Broadband.
Upholding the
free
Constitution.
broadband.
Upholding the Constitution. That's number 10. You know what number 2 is? Broadband. Number 3, public transit. Number 4, public education. See, even they know a little bit about what kitchen table issues are. Number 5, you ready? Number 5, protection and growth of family farms. Not families, family farms. Number 6, access to jobs and worker protections. The protections, not the jobs. Infrastructure. Support of local businesses is 8. Business is 8. Number 9 is access to clean air, water, and land, which Waldman would be eaten up by AOC. And number 10 is upholding the PA and the U.S. Constitution. So you know what it tells me? If healthcare and broadband are number 1 and number 2, they they're not strong on policy. There's an opportunity here. I think it went 4. She got to 4 before she hit a kitchen table issue. Education. So it's healthcare, broadband, public transit, public education. Did you know that public transit is more important than education?
They don't have anything. They
don't have any. They don't have any game.
Which one was the family farm again?
5.
5, and then 9 was clean air.
The growth of family farms, not families.
Okay.
Not protection of families, but the
5.
protection and growth of family farms.
Right, but then clean air, water was all 9, right?
Now
9?
the reason why that's 5 is because we live in a rural area.
Well, no. So Rob, here's my question.
But
how do you juxtapose?
But supporting local business is 8.
So Rob, here's my question. If you have a dairy or cow farm that has beef stock, right? That's 5. That's family farm, number 5. How do you have that when the cows fart and have any credibility on number 9 for clean air and water?
Right.
The whole thing, everything they say is a contradiction. That's exactly right. Everything they say is a contradiction. Let's go back to the debate. Joe Biden, right? I've been saying this for months. I have friends on the left that are making these two arguments to you simultaneously. Trump's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths for not locking down. However, Trump's responsible for the economy collapsing because he locked down.
Right.
Well, how could that be? What was Joe? You have to pick one or the other. Joe Biden's clearly embracing more lockdowns. Now, you might say, hypothetically, that saves lives. But that's certainly going to destroy the economy. You don't get to make both of those arguments at the same time. And we see this constantly. And this is, by the way, this is somewhere
the
where
governor of Pennsylvania did.
I know.
Right.
But this is where Republicans need to be on the offense more. For example, they constantly are calling Trump xenophobic and saying his trade war with China is bad. Okay, then you support the kind of free trade policies we saw that shipped jobs overseas and devastated unions and the middle class in this country.
Yeah, you gotta pivot faster.
Then they say no, we would make sure that China's not economically taking advantage of us. Oh, really? And what would you do? Would you go to war? No, we would use politics. Okay, but what if just discussing them didn't change it? What would you do? Well, maybe we'd put some sanctions. Oh, so you'd do exactly what you just said was racist for Trump to do. I had to go through that 5-minute spiel with you to get you to admit, yeah, we actually agree with what Trump did. We just want to say Trump's a racist. The same with the coronavirus, right? Joe Biden said that Trump was xenophobic because he wanted to lock down travel from... Even the New York Times came out this week and said the World Health Organization was playing politics when they said that locking down travel from places like China was a way to fight the virus. We now know that it is recommended as the single most effective thing you could have done to prevent coronavirus from infecting your country. Yet Joe Biden called it...
Chinese flu.
Right.
The Chinese flu.
Yet Joe Biden called it xenophobic. So now what's Joe Biden saying months later? Of course, I was for that. I was for Trump locking down. You can't make this stuff up. They just say, and again, I can't stress this enough. If you're not involved in debates and talking about this stuff a lot, you can tell when someone's being disingenuous and they're just trying to win an argument. Because their positions at the worldview, if you pull out 100 feet and you look at their positions, you're like, none of this makes sense. None of this goes together. Joe Biden's talking about the need for safety and law and order. He tries to say that, yet his team's bailing out rioters.
Right. There's no objective cohesion and truth to it.
So what it is this. You tell me what you want to hear, and I'll tell you. Now, if the guy next to you says he wants to hear the opposite, hell, I'll tell him the opposite. I don't care. It don't matter to me. And then when it comes to real issues, it's I would rather vote for someone that I hated their positions, that were honest about them. Say what you will about Bernie. I think he's a hypocrite. But Bernie believes in the garbage he's pushing. He does. As opposed to Joe Biden. Maybe the defining issue of this election. Excuse me, Mr. Biden, if you win, will you pack the courts, thereby destroying the separation of powers and basically making whoever wins the presidency and the legislature and the executive control all 3 branches? Will you do that? I refuse to comment on that.
Right.
What are we supposed to do with this? It's a simple... Hell, I would have accepted that... You know how they're criticizing Trump for allegedly not denouncing white supremacy, which is garbage? But what Trump say? Sure. I would have accepted that. If Chris Wallace would have been like, Vice President Biden, will you refuse to pack the Supreme Court? And if he was just like, sure, sure, I would have said, well, at least that was an answer. At least he said, sure, I'm not going to pack the court, right? He wouldn't even say that. He's like, I refuse to address the question. So, I mean, it's everything they say is a contradiction. It's always this way. What? Ask yourself this. Look, and by the way, look at the identity politics garbage, right? It's all a contradiction. Oh, we care about race. We accept. We're here fighting for the black community. By the way, if you don't vote for me, you're not really black. Oh, we respect LGBT rights, and Oh, but by the way, we're going to embrace like Islamic extremism and say you can't criticize them when we see things like the Orlando nightclub shooting that results in 50 people dead in a gay nightclub. Everything they say, they're literally just, they couldn't be more shameless. They're just saying, hey, I'll say whatever you want to hear. Vote for me. All I care about is power. I have no integrity at all. And that's why they don't have any issue. What's the issue they're going to run on? Economically. What are they going to run on? We think we could have done better, but simultaneously we want more lockdowns.
We're raising taxes. We're raising taxes. That's the issue.
Yep.
Todd, 30 seconds on the Michigan court decision, and then final comments.
So Governor Whitmer earlier this week was told that her edicts exceeded the Constitution. I'm sure she'll be appealing here in the next week or so, but that will be the second ruling I believe we've had in a couple of weeks here where you've had a judge rule in favor of the people, if you will, and overrule a governor.
Right. Final comments, Todd.
So as I like to do in my final comments, kind of a look ahead of what's coming up. And this week, potentially tomorrow, we're going to have some answers in the Myrtle Beach case from the Williamsport Area School District.
From the right to know request.
Yes, there has been an appeal filed by me, and we're filing our response, and the district is doing that as well.
And what is the specific issue that you're waiting for?
So we've asked for Brandon Pardo's phone in a specific time frame.
Brendan Pardo being the Williamsport Area High School principal that was at Myrtle Beach and who subsequently did an investigation on himself because his nephew and his son were on the team and he did the investigation. Isn't that lovely?
Correct. So we're going to see what their answer is.
So what happens
tomorrow.
if you get the phone back? If you get the phone, if you get all the information that you want from the phone, what happens and what is the real critical aspect of this story if you get the phone?
So the narrative
what do you believe what do you believe it will reveal?
So the narrative has been that no one knew in Myrtle Beach, that nobody knew till mid-May when the child line call was made. And I've reported for the better part of 2 years that that's just not accurate.
Right.
And the other thing I want to let everybody know is that I recently did a story on search warrants being issued by the Attorney General's office. They're under seal here locally with our president judge.
For 60 days. We will find out exactly who it is when they get unsealed in about 60 days, correct?
Yeah, and I've already uncovered a lot of the parties that have in fact been served those search warrants.
How much fun is that going to be in 60 days?
It's ugly. I've said it for 2 years.
Unless there's arrest before then.
Yeah, it's going to get progressively worse as we get closer to whatever the Attorney General is going to find in his investigation with his team. It's just going to get progressively worse.
Right. So let's be clear. If you get Brandon Pardo's phone, you believe, based on the investigation that you've had, and you believe, based on the evidence that has been presented to you by people that were in Myrtle Beach, that the high school principal at Williamsport Area High School knew about the attacks while in Myrtle Beach. Yeah. Final thoughts, Rob.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, again, say, my thoughts and prayers go out to the First Lady and the President, anyone else around his team that was affected, and anyone who has a loved one that's been infected by COVID. Let me be quite clear on what we have said on this show and what I've said in my personal show from the get-go. I've never said that COVID wasn't serious. I said that we need to try to be as objective as possible. I've said that life is about risk, and sometimes we need to accept a risk. We can't adopt a policy of, we need to make sure that not one person ever dies. If so, we would never leave our homes for any disease, whether it be flu, the cold, etc. And I think that people that have looked at people like us and that have had legitimate questions about the politicization of the decisions regarding COVID and say that somehow that means that we're celebratory or we think that that means people won't get or die of COVID is nonsense. I take every single person that died, my heart goes out to them just like it would any illness. And I understand that this presented far different challenges than a regular flu season or something like that. However, if you're someone out there that's celebrating or tongue-in-cheek kind of chuckling about the fact that you hope the president dies, or any political figure on the right or the left, you need to seriously look at yourself in the mirror. That is not a healthy response, no matter how damaging you think the person that you're arguing against is. It is a very, very horrible thing. And when you accept that and you take that position that you hope they die, and then you start to endorse other policies or other prescriptions, particularly that we see on the left, that says silence is violence, and that we must take action, all of a sudden you can see why political violence is through the roof and why cities are burning down.
Right.
Because people that think, I hate my political opponent and I'm justified in using violence, is a deadly combination. And so I really encourage you, and I mean this on the other side as well. I'm biased, I'm Republican, I'm conservative, I get that. What we can do is control ourselves. I understand there are maniacs on the right as well. There are maniacs in the Republican Party. There are terrible people that thought it was good that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. But it pales in comparison to mainstream voices we see on the left, wishing death or, kind of with a glint in their eye, suggesting that possibly Trump will die. It is absolutely disgusting. But I'll call it out on both sides. What I'm imploring you out there to do is, please, 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 as an individual, you can't control what other people do. The next time someone you despise politically, something terrible happens to them outside the realm of politics, like an illness, an accident, they lose a loved one, please try to have a little empathy and say, yeah, that's terrible that happened to them. I still don't like their political opinion. I still hope they lose their election or whatever. But try to just, as an individual, say, the first step we could come to coming together as a country is not wishing death on the people that we disagree with. And it's sad that we've gone so far that's where we're at now, that we have to say, can we at least come together in not wishing death on each other? Can we do that? And I think that that's something as individuals we could do. I think that, just real quick, it's secondary to that, obviously, but I think that when President Trump comes out of this, which God willing he will, and it looks like that's likely to be the case, that I hope that he uses that as a moment to say, look, I still am taking COVID seriously, as I always have, and now that I've gone through the effects, I could tell you that it's a serious situation, so here's our plan going forward. And that he could use that to kind of dissuade some people out there that are trying to say that he made light of this or something. He did not. He never called it a hoax. This is the left wing and the Democrat media narrative that he called it a hoax. He didn't. And so I just wish him a speedy recovery, and also the First Lady and all the others affected. Go ahead, Todd.
Real quick, Carlos, before your final comment, I want to give you an update. I did get an advisory from CBS News, and they have now updated the fact out of that doctor's press conference that it does look like the president will be released from Walter Reed tomorrow if all things go well. They did update that here within the last 15 minutes.
Awesome.
There's another breaking story, and that is that Hillary Clinton has tested negative for being president. That just came over the wire. So, my usual closing comments are going to be a little bit different today. It's not going to be based on just one core idea. I want to make a couple of comments. The 150 is the approximate number of subjects amongst the tens of thousands of people enrolled in late-stage COVID-19 vaccine trials who need to become infected with the coronavirus to show symptoms in order to have researchers be able to assess the shot's effectiveness. The tiny percentages, the very tiny percentages that could provide enough data for regulators to then make a determination on widespread use. This is a mistake. It takes these regulators the world record of having a vaccine for a virus like COVID was 5 years. This is a mistake to rush a vaccine that could basically open the door for corruption, for neglect, and for people to go and make money off of this at our expense. I should also tell you that, full disclosure, I am against vaccines. Not all of them, some of them. You know, like the rest of the world. This is a mistake. You rush this process, people will die. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that the early TV ratings for the debate last night were down really big. How big? Well, this week, not last night. In 2016,
people were
nearly
distant?
43 million people saw the debates. This year, on Monday, people were saying that they anticipated having over 100 million people watch. The total number of people that watched across all the platforms was 29 million. Guess what that means? It means that everybody has already made up their mind. And we are about to find out what kind of country this really is. Like I said in the opening, are we Marxist totalitarians or are we a capitalist republic? And I think that the thing that I want to say to most of the people who watch our show, who are really interested in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and to make America the country that they love, so they can go and work and raise their families and have liberty and live in peace and have happiness, is they want real leaders. They don't want the smartest guys. They don't want the smartest people. They don't want the most educated people. They want the most real people, which is why reality TV is so popular. I'm not inventing these precepts. I'm just telling you what these precepts mean. We love real. That's why the president is loved. When he tweets awkwardly, when he tweets delusionally, when he tweets the way that he does, when he talks the way that he does, when he is imprecise and wayward, we love real. We loved when he hugged the flag. We loved when his name was called and Secretary Carson was stuck in the middle at that debate, and the president stood with him so he didn't feel that he was an outcast. He understood how uncomfortable Carson was, so he stood with him, and then they came out together. Listen, that's real. That's real. We're going to have a choice. You need to do your homework. And you need to really decide for certain what it is that you want to have this country be on your watch as a voter. And you should also know that Rob and Todd and I will be here to be able to help you in any way understand these precepts and all this confusion and all this miasma. Because we love our country just as much as you do. We'll see you next week.